with very big backers, including Bill Gates, that they're claiming they've figured out how to do these kind of rust batteries that would lower the cost of batteries. The cost per kilowatt hour in lithium right now, the target was about $100 per kilowatt hour. And they're claiming they got it down to about $20 per kilowatt hour. And that would be tremendous if true. And by the way, even Chamath Palihapitiya was talking about this on the All In podcast after we did in this room. And it for people who follow that space, that's a huge announcement. And it's let's cross our fingers that their headlines seem to be geared towards wanting to it was kind of a PR announcement to get more investment activity, but we'll see. So I got to ping. Yeah, let me ping in Chris in here. Hold on one second. Chris.
I can do it for you.
Yeah, please
do. So today is the first session that Cal is on holiday, right?
Yes, Cal's starting his two-ish week summer holiday because his wife's a teacher and they're now on summer break with their kids and they're going offline for a couple weeks. Chris, I have a headline that I emailed to you.
Oh, I'm checking my emails right now.
Yeah, and it's that good.
Bamboo. We've got bamboo here.
Yeah. It's about the bamboo project. So let's start with that one while the room fills up. So this one's really interesting. We discovered it yesterday. It's from the University of Chicago on their webpage. So this is not like a publication. Well, it's a college. Chicago News.
Oh, yeah. A friend of mine sent this. This is legit. This is seriously legit.
Oh, it's seriously legit. Yeah, there's no question it's legit. And it's potentially this is potentially huge news, especially for the bamboo project. So let's just read through this real fast for those who weren't with us when we were here 12 hours ago. Because just for context, and this is why I want to make sure Chris was in the room, there's a website called drawdown.org. Is that it, Chris? Something like that? The Drawdown.
Sorry, yeah, I was on the other tab. Yes, drawdown.org. It's a great website. Strongly recommend to people.
Fantastic website. Yeah.
I have some quibbles with some of the calculations, but it's a fantastic gathering of stuff. It's like saying, hey, there's solutions, and we can use these.
Right. And it does everyone the tremendous favor of even ranking the solutions by the amount of CO2 that can be drawn down. So here's the problem. We have a whole lot of CO2 in the atmosphere, and that's causing a lot of heat. You may have seen headlines about heat in certain areas. You may have even felt heat in your areas if you live in the Vancouver region or others. These heat domes is becoming a very real thing. And these, we've all seen the headlines, right? So that's due to the CO2 in the atmosphere, fundamentally, right? We've seen headlines about glaciers melting, droughts, all this shit. This is all a byproduct of or largely a byproduct of this ever-growing amount of CO2 in the atmosphere. So, of course, we could start to reduce the amount of CO2 we put in the atmosphere by electric cars and, trying to, building electric systems for our solar powered for our house and all that, as we were just talking about. However, how do we get the CO2 that's in the atmosphere, the amount of it, the net amount of CO2 in the atmosphere, how do we reduce that so that we can reduce this greenhouse-like effects that we are now witnessing? That's the big question. And that's called drawdown.org, where there is 100 solutions for reducing the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere. The question is, which are the best? Which are the most effective? Which ones should we actually have the resources to go and try and do without government support necessarily? Which ones could we conceivably achieve? And it turns out when you do this analysis with quite intelligent people, drawdown.org has ranked all of these by how much CO2 could we actually draw down on all of these different initiatives. And it turns out that they rank the highest is growing bamboo forests. Because my God.
Agriculture stuff, just a general drawdown of stuff. Bamboo is one that I rank about 10th or 11th, depending on the math kind of thing. So that's one of the reasons I have some quibbles. But it's a great overall ranking.
Right. So that has led myself and Chris and a few others in the DMs to contemplate the feasibility, which he's been investigating for many years, and and it requires a bit of financial investment. And thank God there actually are some billionaires now, and there will be more as the climate change continues unabated. More billionaires will be very willing to donate their excess capital to projects that reduce the CO2 in the atmosphere. And I happen to have two friends who are billionaires who want to do exactly that and have set aside the funds to do exactly that. And they're begging for people to come to them with viable, real solutions and make legitimate proposals that could reduce the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere. So the idea that essentially is get bamboo seed, tons of it, 100, is approximately 1,000,000 kilograms if we keep it metric.
Yeah, give or take.
And carpet bomb the stuff in areas. Obviously, you wouldn't do it at the North Pole or the South Pole. You obviously would optimize for the areas where it's likely to take root. And you would obviously try to avoid farms to not disrupt farmers in their livelihoods. And you would do all the obvious things, obviously. So then now I say all that to lead up to this headline, which could, in the
not deal.
Yeah, this could be actually really help this particular project. So it's again from University of Chicago's website, and the headline is RNA breakthrough creates crops that grow 50% more potatoes and rice and everything else they've tried it on thus far. The U Chicago-led research could yield increased food production, boost drought tolerance. That's a key word. Boost drought tolerance, and because that would ostensibly allow for larger uptake of bamboo being dropped from an airplane, bamboo seeds being dropped from an airplane. So manipulating RNA could allow plants to yield dramatically more crops as well as increasing drought tolerance, announced a group of scientists from the University of Chicago, Peking University, and Guizhou University. In initial tests, adding a gene encoding for a protein called FTO to both rice and potato plants increased their yield by 50% in field tests. That alone is tremendous. That alone is holy shit, holy cow, 50% more rice and potato out of those plants for each
Just
plant
spray
growth.
Potatoes around the world and the world's fed. We're good to go.
Yeah, and this is particularly near and dear to my heart, where Thailand grows an absurd amount of rice and potatoes, actually. It's two of the main crops that we grow out of Thailand, actually, along with sugar and bananas and pineapples and a whole bunch of other things. Anyway, coconuts as well.
And tech startups now.
And palm oil. The list goes on. But potatoes and rice are absolutely two of our biggest crop exports. And then the plants grew significantly larger, produced longer root systems, and were able to tolerate drought stress. Oh, holy shit. With less water? Fantastic. Significantly less water? That's drought stress. Analysis also showed that plants had increased their rate of photosynthesis. Fantastic. And ostensibly, based on that statement, I assume they also, that leads me to potentially believe that they might even be better at reducing carbon in the air, because if they're doing more a rate of photosynthesis, or they're kind of metabolically acting in a faster manner, maybe they're reducing even more CO2 than conventionally.
It's very simple. All that mass, there's little tiny minerals that come from the roots, sure, but the majority of the actual mass of the plant comes from the air, and that's all CO2. So if you've got biomass in the plant, that's biomass. That's basically carbon that came out of the atmosphere. So bigger plants means more carbon sequestered into a form that you can work with.
Right. So the next paragraph here, and this is a quote from the researchers. The change is really dramatic, said University of Chicago professor Chuan He, who together with Professor Guifeng Jia at Peking University led the research. What's more, it worked with almost every type of plant we tried it with so far, and it's a very simple modification to make. The researchers, along with other leading experts, are hopeful that the potential of this breakthrough, especially in the face of climate change and other pressures on crop systems worldwide, this really provides the possibility of engineering plants to potentially improve the ecosystem of global warming proceeds. As global warming proceeds, said Hay, who is the John T. Wilson Distinguished Service Professor of Chemistry, Biochemistry, and Molecular Biology. We rely on plants for many, many things. Everything from food, wood, food, and medicine to flowers and oil, and this potentially offers a way to increase the stock material we can get from most plants. This is a very exciting technology, and we could potentially help address problems of poverty and food insecurity at a global scale, and could also potentially be useful in responding to climate change, said Michael Kremer, who was awarded the Nobel Prize for his work on alleviating global poverty and is the university professor of economics at the Harris School of Public Policy at the University of Chicago. Hello. Hello, Dr. Hay. We would like to chat with you about the feasibility of doing this with bamboo. And what a nice coincidence that your partners in this project are from Peking University and Guizhou University, because that's where we'll be planning to get the bamboo seed. But then, of course, you'll have to create a new batch of these new GMO bamboo, essentially. And then the question is, well, no, we'll stick with what singular protein that they found that they claim is easy to edit. This protein called FTO. Exciting. That could be exciting. That's fantastic. What a great headline. Anyway, so I'm sharing this out to the Tech News Twitter account, as we always do with all of our headlines, so that people can save them and share them and read them and go into depth in whatever ones are exciting to you, so that you don't have to DM me and say, oh, what was that headline? Where's the link to that story you talked about? Okay, so the next one I wanted to talk. So Chris, before we go on to the next one, anyone else, of course, is welcome to comment on.
Yeah, can I just ask a question as someone who's based at a research institution?
Yeah.
And I straddle science and management with the startup community, but I just think it's really interesting that universities really struggle to connect with people who have money to invest in their research that
Amen.
can be breakthrough. So my daily struggle with some of my colleagues is that, they're so focused on their lab work and on their papers and on their books and their manuscripts and their advisees that any connection to the real world seems like an extra. And I think part of it is just because of the way that university systems are structured in terms of the reward system, but it's also a mentality kind of thing. And I think that there's such a huge opportunity because there's so much exciting research that happens at many research institutions that could possibly be solutions of our most issues that we're facing in society, but there's just such a disconnect. So it's not a question; it's more of a statement of fact and a comment.
I want to piggyback on that, which is the same exact thing happens in startups, by the way, where you get engineers who are geeks who are coding stuff, and they come up with really cool technologies, like when peer-to-peer file sharing was created. And it was like, oh, this whole new way to send files to each other. Oh, what can we do with this? We don't know. And basically, there's, within every startup, there's typically a real core geek coder individual who is terrible at fundraising, typically. And then you get and the classic example is Apple. Steve Wozniak, actually did the physical building of the original Apple computer. And then Steve Jobs comes along, and he's kind of the marketing product, user experience, fundraising type individual, and it's you have the similar dynamic in bands as well. You need a drummer and you need a singer, and it's like different skills. And what Lakeisha is referring to is at these university labs, these R&D centers, it's geeks who didn't take marketing, and communications and fundraising and finance, and so they're geeks, they're innovators, but they don't necessarily know how to productize their innovations. This happens all the time, by the way. I mean, it's amazing to think how many earth-shaking innovations have occurred that didn't get the funding or whatever, because the geeks are just going to geek, and they're just happy to make the solution for its own sake, and then didn't bring it to market, so to speak, because they didn't find their Steve Jobs.
The lab. They're super excited because they got a pub out of it, a publication. Maybe they got, a plaque from the International Federation of Geeks, whichever their sector happens to be. And they are on the homepage of the university. And I say that not in a pejorative way, but just, the ecosystems are so siloed.
Yeah.
So
they want peer validation. because that's what they value. They're not even worried that it makes $1 billion. Like, most entrepreneurs are focused on making a unicorn, and the core geeks that's not their jam. They're more interested in seeking the validation of their peers and through peer, these journals, and that's the currency and credit of their ecosystem. And like I said, no doubt there's been potentially earth-shaking innovations that didn't make it to market because they achieved the goal that they wanted, which they got the validation of their peers, and they got it in a journal. And if somebody takes the ball and runs with it and turns it into a unicorn, there's potentially hundreds, if not thousands, of things that happen like that on each year. So, Chris, you wanted to hold on, Mahan. Chris has been waiting patiently for us to rant, to make a comment on the kind of closing thought on that article about the RNA edit of plants to be super drought resistant.
So, very brief, the one technology essentially that's a little bit unique with bamboo compared to other species is because it has such a long flowering cycle of like 100 years. It's only been relatively recently, in the last like 15 years, we've had the technology to do artificial flowering with with wood species and such. It's a grass, but essentially we know how to induce that artificially. What's unique about this is it means that it's one of the very few crops that over a couple billion people in the world use that has never actually gone through breeding and basically gone through like the typical things that human beings do where we grow better crops over time. So if you combine that with essentially some of the recent breakthroughs with genetic engineering combined with some of that RNA stuff, like we think bamboo is really hot now. Like put a few rounds of essentially some science on that, a couple of years in the lab, they can come with some absolute miracles with stuff. So it's some very, very exciting stuff there.
Very cool.
Chris,
no, hang
Chris.
on. Hold on.
Mohan?
I had just told somebody to hold on. And Mohan, go ahead.
Mohan. Yeah, I was just going to add to the point you and Lakisha were making that there are, of course, exceptions, right? Berkeley and Stanford and so on have spawned any number of startups coming out of university research of, Spark and Databricks and so on and so on. So in the case of Berkeley, for instance, most recently. So it really depends on the university that you're considering as to how good they are with commercializing the university prototypes.
Yeah,
MIT is another one.
Yeah. This is common sense because Stanford and University of Berkeley happen to be in Silicon Valley, where they're literally surrounded by entrepreneurs who are hungry for fantastic new technologies that they can commercialize. So it's nearly any innovation that comes out of Stanford or Berkeley, they are, literally surrounded by millions of people who are hungry to commercialize any new innovations that come out of those two schools. So, and MIT as well in Boston, and Harvard as well. However, just down the street in Los Angeles, or even in my backyard of San Diego at UC San Diego, it wasn't until my senior year till I ran into one of the R&D centers and I saw back in 2000 some mind-blowing innovations that they had around ways of managing traffic and all kind of just truly mind-blowing stuff that no entrepreneur ever saw. But the lab had figured out some really crazy cool tech, and likely many of those weren't going to be commercialized, and that's just in down the road in San Diego, where there's not the same kind of armies of entrepreneurs and venture capitalists to fund those kinds of projects. But
yeah, and I would just say it's the broader ecosystem. It's the marriage of the two. I mean, at the University of Minnesota, Medtronics, which is one of the world's leading biotech companies, was spun out of university research. But I think that it's about Stanford and Berkeley and the entrepreneurs who are, they have constant contact. So it's not only about the university culture. It's also about, who's in the broader community and how wedded they are in terms of going to happy hour and talking to each other and getting to know each other and sharing ideas. And I guess my point is that so often there is a wider gulf than not.
Yeah. So
there are also Madison, Wisconsin, University of Toronto, Waterloo. There are some, out of the ordinary schools also that are far away from these big
Let's get back to
ecosystems.
Okay, that's great. Back to the tech headlines. Cheryl, what's up?
I just wanted to bring up the concern that Vivian had yesterday for Chris. So it's regarding, of course, the GMO seeds, whether there will be any impact on the soil, especially on those places that you're going to sow the seed on those non-native region, and will it affect the biodiversity of the...
So it was Vivian came in when we were talking about this headline, Chris, and she expressed concern about using bamboo seeds out of their native regions, so to speak, by
I would say to anyone that basically brings to that point, I would strongly recommend looking at succession ecologies and looking essentially how soils get built up. Typically what will happen is you'll have species that are basically very aggressive and basically very good at basically colonizing soils that are very sandy and that don't have very strong amounts of biomass. What will end up happening is over time they basically get replaced by basically species that basically are succession ecologies, but basically are better at taking advantage of the fact that now there's soil to work with, and now essentially they raise the water table. Bamboo is essentially something that's very, very good at basically working in that succession ecology paradigm of basically establishing soils where they wouldn't be otherwise, essentially restoring degraded lands, and the biodiversity actually increases in the areas that where bamboo is put, not decreased, and that's a very big part of what makes it awesome.
We have actually the name of my company is actually Bamboo, and because of that, we're looking at that bamboo has the possibility to grow everywhere in the world, even very humid or very dry places. Once the plant is dry and you water it again, it will still grow again. It's extremely fast growing. It is extrememely flexible, but it's one of the strongest materials, even in construction, you can use. So I think there are many characteristics which make it extremely valuable. But again, it grows basically everywhere.
Yeah. No, I mean, you look at you Google the map bamboo belt to get a good idea of where it natively grows on the planet.
That's where it's currently growing.
Yeah, natively is one, but I'm not talking natively. That's just if you want to use it somewhere else, it also grows.
That's
actually I have it in my yard in Switzerland here.
Yeah, but that's the beauty of this point of this article, that if it becomes more drought resistant, it ostensibly raises and lowers the latitudes of feasibility. You might get it might make it far more applicable to Europe and America if it be this drought resistant RNA edit with this protein, which would be fantastic, because now you've got 10 times more land, or not 10 times, double or triple the amount of geography where you can deploy it. Yeah. So fantastic. So yes, Willie.
Just a second, because I'm totally to encourage people into this. We have to do it, and there are so much interesting solutions. Just to be very aware about the gigantic, huge volume of the task. Think about bringing the ghost back into the bottle, because what we have done is from 1,000 and 10,000 and 100,000 of years of forestation of the earth, when the forests were there, they were deoxified. And this is what we now know as coal and all the fossil fuels.
Please make a very strong, short point. What's the main point you want to make?
Now think about, we have put oxidation on them. Now they are in the atmosphere. Yeah, this is the CO2 result. And now we have returned the whole process. Yeah, this is really so gigantic, like nothing else in human history, because we have burned so much of it, and it's exactly the reverse process. And if you are planting, now is the point, if you are planting an acre of bamboo, whether with RNA or not, it's not like a layman might think, and you are not layman, I know, that now it takes all the CO2 out and creates a lot of oxygen, but you have to leave it there until it's grown, let's say 10 meters high. And then it has to stay here to have the carbon back into the plant, the CO2 back into the plant, but you cannot cut it. Yeah, you cannot harvest it, because then you would burn it again, and it's a zero game then. So it's really so super huge. Yeah, and so we have also to see other solutions. Maybe in the ocean, I don't know. And our dilemma is that the solution must be so big that the risk, of course, will be rather high, and we have to convince people about the risk. Thank you.
So very briefly with things. So the carbon drawdown in the ocean is also a great option. There's also kelp solutions. I've been looking at those recently.
Yeah,
but
me too.
Bamboo's a nice one for quick implementation. When you're talking about how much land, you're looking about 30 tons per hectare is the norm. Of 3,000.
If you could RNA edit kelp, that would be a good big game changer too. I think.
I'm looking forward to all these things. Like these are all essentially tools in the toolbox. And what's cool is you can basically combo them together to get like all sorts of cool things depending on what's politically available or economically, which is great. One quick point I did want to raise is that bamboo typically what's interesting about it is that most species, each culm is what they call the individual stalks or whatever, the individual poles. Each culm will essentially last about 5 years, and then it basically naturally dies off and just falls over. So typically what they do is they basically will take little like fingernail polish or whatever, and they'll mark each culm, and they'll put a different one each year, and they'll just harvest each culm essentially on year 4 essentially. And so it's a continuous harvest cycle. This makes it a very, very different carbon drawdown profile than a typical tree, where essentially a tree will grow for 30 years, but really it only grows in the first like 2 or 3 sequestering carbon. The rest just kind of sits there. And it takes a very long time for it to reach its full carbon drawdown potential. Very different from bamboo, where it's basically constantly growing and constantly bringing in carbon, essentially either into the plant or into the soil around it. So it's very, very shiny in that regard.
And Chris, you would use the bamboo, right?
We're not going on about guys. We're not. This is not bamboo tech around the world. Jesus fucking Christ. Okay, the first headline is the Google unveils the Pixel 6. And because they want to get a 1 month head start on the iPhone announcement that comes out almost exactly 1 month from now, as it has every year since the beginning, 2007. And Google knows that. And so Google very strategically announces their phone to come out, 1 month before the iPhone, and they call theirs Pixel. So now this is the 6th Pixel, hence the name Pixel 6, with a 6.4 inch 90 megahertz display. And that's going to bum some people out, but they do have the Pixel 6 Pro with the 6.7 inch 120 hertz display, which is what everybody wants, this new 120 hertz display, and a 4x optical zoom with Google designed Tensor chip. And again, it's just fantastic to see Google continue to take inspiration from Apple on their every step, as Apple making their own chips. Now Google's making their own chips. And
if people realized how easy that processor is to make, people would have a very different opinion about this thing. It's literally like you'd literally take a calculator, take 12 functions, and then you basically hook it up to a bunch of memory. That is literally what they've got for essentially their entire AI processor, and they've got a lot of that. It's not like a CPU where you have to encode like 3,000 different functions or something. Right. But the thing is that they've got the brilliant TensorFlow library that takes all their math and all their AI algorithms and shrinks into run of that. So that's all the magic there. Yep. But it's cool because more companies can do this on a more frequent basis. You don't have to be a tech giant to do it. It's something that it's a lot more accessible for groups these days.
Yes, because Google's not a chip maker, so it's they haven't really done the investment yet. No doubt they are starting to internally, because they, like every big tech company that makes any amount of hardware, want to kind of become less dependent on chip manufacturers over time. But this Tensor chip, the chip shortages,
especially with the logistics showing that shortages are so easy,
Yep.
And are they going to make their own phones, do you think, or are they going to continue to use, what is it, THC?
HTC.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know if HTC is making this one or not. They did make the original Pixels. I don't know if that's still the case. But it's a good point, which is they don't even do their own hardware production. But in a sense, neither does Apple. They're using Foxconn and Flextronics or whatever. So Google, the Pixel 6, to Chris's point, this particular processor, Tensor is TensorFlow. Actually, Megdi, you could jump in on this, I imagine.
So here's where, so I'm a little bit confused. I thought this was a SoC like designed to compete or replace the Snapdragon. So
no,
those are more complicated than the AI chips.
Yeah. This is system on a chip, SoC, which does make it a bit. It's a new kind of approach to developing hardware because you can run multiple processes, so to speak, and make the whole. It's kind of the brain. And then in this case, if they really want to optimize for AI, so that this device can do essentially your Google Assistant will operate a lot better in this device because they have kind of created an architecture optimized for running Google Assistant, essentially. So, and I think that's going to create a user experience that is novel and unique and differentiates itself from Apple iPhones, which I agree. I think Apple needs to make focus and improvements on Siri, or people might start switching to Android just because of if you see a significant benefit or difference in the performance of Google Assistant over Siri, that could become a distinguishing factor that people would ostensibly jump platforms for. I kind of include.
I want Scarlett Johansson from Her. Like I want that level.
Yeah, and Google's likely to get there before Apple at looking at the rate of where they are allocating their resources and focuses. Google's going that direction, and with creating Her, Apple's not. They're focusing in a kind of different direction in terms of the allocation of resources. And my suspicion is Google might win in the next few years if they continue with that strategy. And you might see iPhone folks switching over just because the AI gets so good that you just use your phone as a voice input system, and it intuitively starts to know everything you want to do in advance, due to the fact that Google has a strong AI emphasis in the company. And Apple needs to recognize, I'm no doubt they understand that and recognize that and are doing what they can to address it. But so anyways, that's kind of what Pixel 6 is all about in a nutshell. So next big headline at this very moment is a sub-headline to the first one. So this is 1.5. Google's Rick Osterloh demos Pixel 6 Tensor system on a chip, which enables real-time object detection and HDR in videos, as well as real-time translation and live captions. And these are all the use cases that are enabled by an AI system on a chip, as we were just highlighting.
The big thing on there is real time. So yes. Just as a brief little thing, so we used a thing for Microsoft HoloLens for basically doing the augmentation of visual stuff. One of the big things that separate our tech from a lot of other groups was that everyone else is basically making cloud calls, which is great, except it takes you 5-10 seconds round trip time, which dramatically affects user experience.
Yep.
All their interactions were basically happening within sub 300 millisecond latency. We were aiming for closer to about 100. And what's amazing about that is that when it drops below that, it's below perception time frame. So it becomes just an extension of the body at that point. Now, what's really important about this is that when we're talking about these functionalities, I want to say none, but almost very few of these functionalities are things that we haven't seen before. Except the thing is they're slow and laggy and feel really just not quite there. Getting it to run in real time locally on the phone and having it accessible to everyone, so you don't, regardless of your internet connection, that's a big deal on usability, and that's going to push us over the foundation of something that's just going to be nice to have as a gimmick to show off to someone, and something you can have on the operating system running all the freaking time every time you use the most used app on the phone, which is the camera. So it's going to be really, really cool. Well, camera and the messaging, but they're going to tie it into both of that just to inject it straight into the user experience.
Yeah, it's essentially, to summarize, internally they're referring to it as ambient computing. And as this article correctly points out, it says, with the Pixel 6, the new Tensor chip, we're about to see how Google will use AI and machine learning to really push its vision of ambient computing, which is using Google Assistant as an extension of your own brain in the same way that you use the Google search engine as an extension of your brain, where it's kind of you do input and you get immediate response. And that's the key. And Google has focused on that from year one, with that immediacy of response is what creates habitual behaviors in users and locked in, user dependency, where you won't. That's why you've never abandoned the Google search engine. and likely never will, because it's become a subconscious behavior. And once they've got that, they know they've got you. And once they can do that on the phone with ambient computing, where it's kind of voice controlled, or they even proactively understand what you're likely to do next, then they will really have you, and they'll, you're going to start seeing all kinds of amazing use cases. And it's that immediacy, breaking that 5-second delay. That 5-second delay, you're not building a habit out of that, and they know that. And that's why they had to put the system on the chip and not in the cloud, so that to get that millisecond response for when you talk to the Google Assistant, or when you hold up the camera. Here's a great example. You hold up your camera in this AR, because we're not far away from having the goggles either, but this is where it gets really big. You hold up your phone in camera mode, and you're looking, to take a photo. But now every product that you look at, every plant you look at, it can tell you the name of the plant in real time. Every dog you look at, it'll tell you the breed of the dog. If every person you look at, this is where Clearview comes in, it could tell you the person instantly. if the ones that you facially recognize, maybe they could start, that gets really wild. But more importantly, any product you look at, it knows what that product is. It knows that those are Nike Air Jordans from 1985, and here's how much they cost right now on online platforms near you, and can one click have delivered. And that use case alone, there's endless use cases that we could go into, but that particular one is perhaps the most economically viable ROI, return on investment, of use case. The most lucrative use case is recognizing every product near you instantly with no delay, like seamlessly point your camera at something, and without the delay of going to the cloud and back, this 5-second delay, you just hold your camera up and boom, instantly the price is a floating little bubble next to any product in any store that you walk around. You no longer need to search on Amazon for anything. The price is right there in the camera in real time. And then you click on the little bubble of the price, and it tells you everything about the product, and the reviews are probably right there as well. Or maybe it has the price tag and the actual star. It says 4.5 stars or 4.2 stars or 4.9 stars on any product that you move around inside of any store that you're walking in, or whatever. So that alone could be transformative. But we're talking about the phone because we don't yet have the AR glasses, which are coming very, 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 very soon. And when we switch over to the glasses, as we just learned from Facebook, they've announced, Mark Zuckerberg has said their glasses are coming out before the end of the year, and that the glasses we have, all of the strong indicators are that it will work off of your phone, which could be your Android phone, which could be this Pixel 6, which has the system on a chip. And now you've got the glasses, which are a partnership with Ray-Ban, which is essentially just a camera, in the corner of your glasses, that feeds into your phone, that it's connected via Bluetooth, that could do the real-time system on a chip, AI, image recognition, instantly show you the price of everything. And although, no, the prices would need to be a cloud pull, because all of that data of the prices.
Not necessarily.
No?
You're going to have to preload these. Well, so here's the really interesting thing is, because you're going to have to preload so many signatures in advance for what you're going to be scanning for visually, you can also preload metadata, essentially, for things for, like, the market provider and the other parts. You could have recent price points on that. You could have it where when you GPS detect, they already do this for push marketing, right. Essentially notifications Bluetooth when you walk into a store. It's like, oh, the person's in the store, they're shopping for something. You could just preload the entire store catalog onto your phone, and because AI compression is magic, you could basically, that you're looking at like a 10 megabyte file to essentially have every product in the store visually recognizable. One of the big things is that the phones, or even the glasses with things, one of the biggest technical challenges they're running into is just the fact that, well, two of them. One is that the battery is very, we'll do the battery one for now, but the battery essentially runs down the stuff so much, you can only run these for about 20 minutes or 30 minutes before essentially you run all of juice. The reason why a custom chip actually becomes a technical necessity isn't just round trip latency. It's also the fact that, well, you can actually run it without draining all the battery on the phone, because you can run it very hyper energy efficient when you build it just for that application, and that's basically what we're getting out of these things.
So
always on.
Yeah. Anyway, so it's this Google, but as this article correctly points out, It says the Pixel 6R, my biggest takeaway is that Google is incredibly confident when it comes to this launch. But with the Pixel 6, Google isn't just doubling down on AI and machine learning, it's trying to capitalize on more than 5 years of research and development in a significant way. While it's still too early to call the Pixel 6 a success, we'll have to wait until next month when people get their hands on it. But the point is that indeed they've been focusing on this AI wonderfulness, and now they need a device that can take advantage of it. And to do that, they need to upgrade the device with this system on a chip, Tensor, which is AI, the AI system. TensorFlow is where people build these AI algorithms and stuff. And that's the phone is optimized, the device is optimized to take advantage of the years of AI innovation that Google's been doing.
Sid's not here, but I'm pretty sure Apple has had this since A12, right? Their neural networks built into their processors.
Yeah, but they don't have quite the AI teams and offerings, for lack of a better word. It's not quite up to the same level that Google's at. They optimize
internally. They have it. Internally, they have the problem is that Google relies very heavily on the external developer ecosystem and the fact that they've got system partnerships. Apple will just buy you, and if you're inside the Apple, they bought your thing, it works fantastic for the very specific applications they've allowed you to build. Google is more of a, hey, here's the platform, just have fun, have fun with it, just don't touch the radios. Because they for the SEC, but the thing that's important about this is that those chips essentially, Pixel phones have basically historically been something of a reference device, essentially saying, hey, look, here's Android done right with every single function that we could basically put on here. We didn't have to do any compromise for the carriers or for ship dates or anything else like that. So when they're saying here's a system on a chip, what they're really saying is other carriers saying, hey, look, you can do this too. The IP cores are over here. Here's the vendors. And this is how you basically build a Google phone. And so all the other vendors say, oh, we want to build a device that's like that kind of thing. And now they have the ability to basically copy and paste the system on chips to their own designs. And now you've got Android, has another decade in the sun.
Okay, next big headline. So there's a lot behind this Pixel 6 that I think most people are not aware of unless they had the pleasure of joining Chris here in Tech News. So thank you for that, Chris. The next big article at this very moment is that Twitter partners with Reuters and AP, who will provide context and highlight links from trusted sources for trends, moment search, and more. Twitter announced today. This is really interesting news.
We tried to kill off journalism. We just decided it's like, oh, wait, we need to have some of those guys back to take the heat for us.
Yes and no, because now they're playing favorites, which is likely to piss off all the other journalists. So, by the way, because I remember recommending in the earliest days of Twitter, when there was only 20 people on the whole team, meeting with the founders, like, why not have like a Twitter news desk where you start to curate the most interesting stuff, and and then you can't do that because you're competing with all the other news outlets, to do all that. But now, essentially, this headline, here we are, 2021. That was back in 2006-07. But here we are, 25 years later, or 15 years later, sorry. Twitter announced today it's partnering with news organizations AP and Reuters. And by the way, all the other news organizations are like, fuck you guys. To expand its efforts focused on highlighting reliable news and information on its platform. Through the new agreements, Twitter's curation team, this is now you're becoming a publisher when you do this. Be careful with the language around this stuff.
Regulation's coming anyways. They've got lobbyists in position.
Bye Section 230. If you start having your curation team starts being perceived as a editor, as soon as you're an editor, you're a publisher. As soon as you're a publisher, you don't have Section 230. You've lost your platform protections. Now you're responsible for everything that happens on your website. You're no longer a platform where everyone can say whatever they want, without restriction. You're now a publication, and you're responsible for everything that gets said in that publication. And that's why the New York Times often gets sued, even by our friend Charles, who has a lawsuit, who's suing publishers regularly who, libel and do all that. So they got to be careful with this. Twitter's curation team will be able to leverage the expertise of the partnered organizations to add more context to the news and trends that circulate across Twitter, as well as aid with the company's use of public service announcements during high visibility events misinformation labels, and more. Currently, the curation team works to add additional information to content that includes top trends and other news on Twitter's Explore tab. And notice they're highlighting how they add content and not reduce content, because that's what then you get into editing, and that's where you get in deep shit. The team is also involved with how certain search results are ranked. That's where you start to get in a little dicey trouble as well. To ensure that the content from high quality searches appear at the top of search results when certain keywords or hashtags are searched for on Twitter, the team may also be involved with the prompts that appear in the Explore tab on the home timeline related to major events like public health emergencies such as a pandemic or other events like elections, and they may help with the misinformation labels and appear on tweets that are allowed to remain more visible on Twitter but are labeled with informative context from authoritative sources. These include tweets that violate Twitter's rules around manipulated media, election integrity, and COVID-19. However, the team operates separately from Twitter's trust and safety team, that's the team that does take stuff down, which determines when tweets violate Twitter's guidelines and punitive action like removals or bans must be taken. Twitter confirmed that neither AP nor Reuters will be involved in those sorts of enforcement actions, rather obviously. But by working more directly with AP and Reuters, who also partner with Facebook on fact checks, Twitter says it will be able to increase the speed and scale to which it's able to add this additional information to tweets and elsewhere on its platform. In particular, that means in times where news is breaking and when facts are in dispute on a story emerges, Twitter's own team will be able to quickly turn to these more trusted sources to improve how contextual information is added to the conversations taking place on Twitter. This could also be useful in stopping misinformation from going viral. Twitter's new crowdsourced fact-checking system called Birdwatch, which is kind of humans acting like Wikipedia editors in real time, the comment on tweets that get flagged, will also leverage feedback from AP and Reuters to help determine the quality of information shared by Birdwatch participants. So, long story short now, when there's contentious stuff happening and it's not clear what the facts are, rather than Twitter trying to make a decision as to what the facts are, which they often get in very deep shit for doing, especially around, they were silencing people who around the lab leak theory, for example, picking one example out of a potential haystack of examples. When months ago, when the lab leak theory was unkosher, and they were trying to remove people discussing that and kind of hiding that information, and they didn't know. Twitter gets in the difficult position, the impossible position of policing what news is real and isn't, which they are a platform. They should not be in that business. That is not their business to be the policeman of what news is fake news and not. They don't know. They're not journalists. They're not out there finding the facts. AP and Reuters are. And now you understand why they need that partnership, because now they can delegate and defer and step out of the limelight in that issue and be like, no, now we're going to let AP and Reuters essentially be the guidance of, truthiness around what's the reality around all of these narratives that are developing in real time around the planet. So when somebody puts up an article that may be fake news or not, we don't know. Is it a breaking story? And I'm going to give you a great example as soon as this story's over. When a really contentious headline comes up and Twitter doesn't know if it's real or not, AP and Reuters is likely to be a reliable source for being able to verify if something is truthiness or not. And so they'll defer to that. And they'll just add AP or Reuters related headlines on top of this, New York Post story or Huffington Post story or, what's another good BuzzFeed story, because the BuzzFeed story might be real, it might not. And now they're using AP and Reuters as a litmus, as a measure of, they can overlay their headlines right next to it to be like, well, here's what a more reliable news source is saying about this particular narrative. Okay, problem solved. Now we've given the user additional context to make a decision, an informed decision as to whether or not this Huffington Post or Vox article is fake news or not. So That's essentially what it's all about. But now here's a wild example. Check this out. We saw a headline when we gathered here 12 hours ago. Oh boy, did we find an interesting headline. And the headline was from, the source is New York Post, which, this is one of those outlets that from time to time they have real news and they have fake news. They have both, right? And the headline is, and this came out, it was 3 hours old when we read it 12 hours ago. So it's 15 hours old at this moment. And the headline is, and there's more than meets the eye to this headline, by the way. I've done some investigating journalism of my own, and I found out something about this headline. So take this all with a bit of grain of salt as I read it. It says, Taliban members are reportedly running chat rooms on Clubhouse. From 15 hours ago, New York Post. And the article says, members of the Taliban are running chat rooms within the app where they discuss their plans for the future of Afghanistan. As the Taliban sweeps across Afghanistan, some members of the Islamic terrorist group are apparently making time to log into Clubhouse, a trendy audio-based social media app. Taliban spokespeople are running chat rooms with the app where they discuss religion and their plans for the future of Afghanistan, which is rapidly falling into the extremist group's control amid the withdrawal of the American troops. Agence France Presse responded. That's AFP. And AFP is kind of like the Reuters of Europe, an easy way to say it. And where there's a quote, the Taliban there's a quote from somebody who was in the room with the Taliban. And the quote is, the Taliban called me rude and cut my mic after I spoke the truth about them. Haina Shaheba Malik, an Afghan Clubhouse user who joined a Taliban room, told AFP. They openly declared those of us calling for human rights as infidels and deserving of death. And then the article continues. Clubhouse terms of service forbid immoral, racist, and discriminatory behavior based on race, ethnicity, national origin, caste, sexual orientation, gender identity, religious affiliation, age.
We need this platform during Iraq. Seriously, this would have made things a little bit more interesting.
Well, that's what led me to think we should get I proposed a wild idea that maybe we get the Taliban in here to talk with the president of Afghanistan, because that is hold on. So this was the headline. And then the article continues. The AFP first covered the Taliban's use of Clubhouse on July 16th. So 2 weeks ago. This Saturday, a Taliban spokesperson was once again live on the app calling for better relations between Afghanistan and Iran while praising the country's theocratic system of government, according to a nonprofit South Asia Media Research Institute, which monitors Taliban communications. A Clubhouse spokesperson denied that the group tolerates terrorist group, or that the group I think they mean the app, tolerates terrorist groups. There is a quote here in the story from Clubhouse prohibits terror groups and their members, the spokesperson told the Post. We work with Tech Against Terrorism as well as other subject matter experts and industry leaders to ensure that users of this nature are permanently removed from the platform. So that, I guess, Clubhouse has made an official statement that they don't welcome the Taliban. Content on Clubhouse, which gained a right, and then they talk about Elon Musk and whatnot. Clubhouse policies also explicitly prohibit users from recording or quoting statements made through the app, but some Afghan Clubhouse users told AFP that the Taliban is recording Clubhouse sessions in order to mark critics for future retribution. A Taliban spokesperson who also operates a Twitter account with 232,000 followers denied threatening opponents on Clubhouse in a statement to AFP. Social media is becoming increasingly important for the Taliban as the group looks to usurp Afghan's U.S.-backed government. Almost half of the country's 37 million residents have internet access and 13 million use social media. AFP reported making apps like Clubhouse an important way to reach Afghans. So,
Tyler, last session, and so CEO Paul was here with things of Clubhouse. He's not in the audience right now, but this would have been a wonderful time just to invite him to the stage. Hey, what do you think about the Taliban on the Clubhouse?
Was here last night, Chris.
Yeah, he was here while we talked about it for an hour, and he was here.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's great. Okay, so it's what? Do you have any official statements on the Taliban factor? It's impromptu.
So here, it's a wild concept, but I mean, now that actually this is additional context because that additional paragraphs. I had not. This was the first time I'm noticing them myself, where there's this new statement from Clubhouse spokespeople, which very unambiguously state they don't welcome terrorists. Clubhouse prohibits terrorist groups and their members. The spokesperson told the Post, "We work with." So I assume they're referring to the Taliban, and so they're going to not. The Taliban won't be allowed on the platform, which
that would explain Paul's hesitation to come on stage.
They're Taliban.
Yeah, they've been Taliban.
They're still on the terrorist group list. There's like an actual physical list that they have of all the different things. They're still on that one, right?
Yeah. So yeah, it started on July 16th, but then it apparently they've been on more recently, because the headline was yesterday was about this new person who took to Twitter. And when did she take to Twitter to make her tweets about having her mic cut? She kind of left the room in a huff and went to Twitter because she got her mic muted.
At a platform where she's actually heard free speech.
Yeah, she got her mic muted and she took to Twitter to express her discontent with the Taliban, cutting her mic off. So the question is, when did she do her tweets? Because maybe, then you could make the argument that they're still active on the app or whatever. Who knows? Because it's all they're likely speaking in Pashtun. They're speaking in their local language, which is either Urdu or Pashtun. And so unless you've got a translator, we don't really know what was said in those rooms anyway. So, and there was also an article that they had done an interview with a journalist from Iran. And some Pashtun, with the Taliban are Pashtun, and some of them speak Persian because it borders with Iran. And so they were talking about Iran formally recognizing the Taliban as the new government of Afghanistan, which the Taliban is desperate for people to do that. China's the first to do it, essentially. And anyway, so it's wild. But by the way, the thing that I thought was interesting is the Taliban is now pressuring the Afghan leadership, government, for lack of a better word, into a negotiation to either do a power sharing government for Afghanistan, or if that's not going to happen, then of course they'll have a duel to the end to see who's going to rule Afghanistan. So they're gonna have a conversation at some point. And the Taliban's very outwardly vocal about saying, "Hey, we're not interested in fighting. Let's sit down and talk about if we're going to have a power sharing agreement for Afghanistan." And thus far, the Afghan leadership is not engaging. And if they continue to not engage, the Taliban's waiting for a response. And if they don't respond, then eventually it will turn into hot conflict. And then we'll see the result of that arm wrestling match, who ends up, as the last person standing as the new leadership of Afghanistan. So my proposal was, if they're going to have that conversation, why not have it in Clubhouse? That would be that's a historical conversation to determine the future of Afghanistan. And although they do have a spokesperson who speaks English, and the president of Afghanistan does also speak English, so potentially they could do it in English, and that would just be mind-blowing to be able to listen into that conversation publicly. Anywho, it seems as though we now have our answer that Clubhouse is not welcoming that. I totally respect that. I totally understand that. And that's your call. It's your platform. So
I think that's around the time that I woke up from my 2 a.m. nap, and Faraz popped back in and him a question about it. He said, no, I don't want to interview the Taliban. Last night, to say the least.
So we got to get through the top big headlines, because we just got through Twitter and Reuters. We've only covered 2 headlines thus far. So we
went deep.
We are going deep. They're interesting headlines worth going deep on. The next big headline, number 3, is from The Guardian and others. The French government found proof of Pegasus malware on 3 French journalists' phones and has referred to its findings to the Paris Public Prosecutor's Office. Announcement is first time an independent and official authority has corroborated Pegasus project findings. So this article says, French intelligence investigators have confirmed that Pegasus spyware has been found on the phones of 3 journalists, including a senior member of staff at the country's international television station, France 24. It is the first time an independent, to kind of regurgitating here, it's essentially corroborating the findings of the Pegasus Project, a consortium of 17 media outlets, including The Guardian and Paris. They're based in Paris themselves. So, and that was the original source of the 50,000 number list. And now they're finding out who in the country has had Pegasus, and now they're starting to name names, as we said they would. So that's the Washington Post has an article somewhat related saying the government's facing a severe shortage of cyber workers when it needs them the most. And there's a related article we touched on in the last meeting from NBC News about female journalists from Al Jazeera who had their personal photos leaked on Twitter, which they know were private photos that were never ever shared off of their phone, of them in bikinis in jacuzzis, which in the Middle East is kind of a hot topic. In the West, people would think nothing of it.
Non-kosher.
Yeah. So not only were they leaked, but they were being mocked by official government representatives of Saudi Arabia. And that's why they believe that Saudi Arabia, which it was already confirmed that Saudi Arabia had hacked Khashoggi and his wife's phone. And then prior to Khashoggi entering the Istanbul embassy, where after his phone was hacked, he personally got hacked. And then now these Al Jazeera female journalists are saying they also were hacked. Their photos were leaked and they were mocked. And by the way, they were critical of the Saudi regime in their Al Jazeera articles, just as Khashoggi was. So they're understandably a little tense at the moment, a little anxious, and further fuel to the fire that the Saudis were using Pegasus against journalists that were speaking unfavorable of them. So that's those headlines. The French journalists and the French government and their intelligence agencies have confirmed that their French journalists and the editor of their biggest TV outlet was hacked by Pegasus. The question is, which country in that case? The next big article is from the EFF, Electronic Frontier Foundation, who do very nice work in helping people. It's kind of like the ACLU of the internet is one way to think of it, perhaps. Anyway, but they're more geeky. They understand tech. And so this headline is "The confusing language in the infrastructure bill's crypto provisions suggests that nearly any entity in crypto is a broker and must collect their users' data." Very interesting. And this is what the EFF does very well, because they've got legit geeks who legit understand technical issues such as this, which traditional journalists do not. So they are a bit of a publication. You know, they have a website that people follow, and they're now doing God's work here on their website, which I got to tweet this out so that you can see the website for yourself. And they're basically now they've looked at this infrastructure bill that's coming out of, Washington, D.C. And this bill is related to crypto. It was going to essentially tax crypto. And this infrastructure bill is, $800 billion to improve the infrastructure of America. And some of the funding for it was going to be to oversimplify, sort of tax crypto land. Right?
Tyler, just to clear something up, crypto's already taxable. It's just not enforced. So this is really an enforcement mechanism.
Okay.
It's already treated as a capital gain, but there's no reporting, so people don't do it. So this is more an enforcement mechanism than a new tax. Yeah.
And what this EFF has now found by going through the infrastructure bill with a microscope is that the forthcoming Senate draft of Biden's infrastructure bill, which is 2,000 pages, was designed to update the U.S. roads, highways, and digital infrastructure, contains a poorly crafted provision that could create new surveillance requirements for many within the blockchain ecosystem. This could include developers of little blockchain startups and others who do not control digital assets on behalf of the users. By design, by the way. That's kind of the whole point of non-custodialship of blockchains is we don't want to control these digital assets of these users. That's the whole entire point of Bitcoin originally by Satoshi Nakamoto is we don't control it. It runs autonomously, non-custodial. There's nobody managing it. It runs on its own. And nor can we stop it even if we wanted it to. That's the entire premise of Satoshi's Bitcoin and blockchain that Bitcoin runs on. That's the whole point. And so now they're saying the government, as the governments do, are saying, you know what? We don't like things like that because it's uncontrollable. It's wild. It's digital anarchy. We don't like anarchy. We're a government. You must control it. So it's the bear hug, as Amey and I and others in the crypto world refer to it. While the language is still evolving, the proposal would seek to expand the definition of a quote-unquote broker under Section 6045C-1 of the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 to include anyone who is responsible for the regularly providing any service effectuating transfers of digital assets. Gotcha, Satoshi. Hey, Satoshi, we got you. IRS got your number, baby. You're done. IRS rule right here, 6045C1 says, and I quote, responsible for and regularly providing a service effectuating transfers of digital assets. That's a Bitcoin. It's a digital asset. We got you. Checkmate, Satoshi. You're done. IRS, we got you. Guilty as charged. And so, because you're providing a service, that's the words, of transfers of digital assets, that's what your blockchain does. And thus, you are responsible. You can pretend that you're not. It can run on its own even while you're in jail. That's fine. You're still responsible. You're offering the service. So on behalf of another person, these newly defined quote-unquote brokers, that's the legal word, would be required to comply with IRS reporting requirements for brokers, including filing Form 1099s with the IRS. That means they would have to collect user data, including names, users' names, and addresses. Oh boy, goodbye blockchains, you're done. Bye-bye. You're all done. All of you. The broad, confusing language leaves open a door for almost any entity within the cryptocurrency ecosystem to be considered a broker. Yeah, that's intentionally. They're not stupid. They want to control it all. This is the official legal bear hug, hidden within this 2,000-page infrastructure bill. And if this bill passes, bye-bye cryptoland. You're done forever, over. You are brokers. You are now legally responsible in America to provide the names and addresses of anybody on your blockchains. Game over. Checkmate. Bye-bye. Bitcoin goes to zero. So, why the Bitcoin community hasn't read this 2,000-page bill? Well, they probably have other things to do. You know, there's good episodes of...
It's like 2,700 pages. I think I have on my hard drive right now with things. It's ridiculous. There's no way the senators have read it.
They've got some, cartoons to watch and video games to play, and they've not yet had the moment, to pause and read this 2,000-page infrastructure bill.
They're in the metaverse. They're in their blockchain, hanging around.
Can you read the infrastructure bill in the metaverse? That's a great question. Go ahead, Ken.
No, I was going to point out that provision with the crypto is critical to the whole bill because, at least in theory, it's the only revenue mechanism they have to pay for this stuff because they voted against everything else in terms of raising taxes or doing more audits of high net worth people. So this is it. So in order to kind of pass that budget test, this has to stay in there. Otherwise, there's no infrastructure bill.
That's sad.
Yeah, well, they've already done the crypto. They already know that it's likely to pass. They've kind of done the warm up votes or whatnot. Yeah, Cheryl?
No, I'm just wondering how come we have no crypto person on stage today. We can't ask.
Well, okay. Someone will pop in a minute. Indeed, perhaps this extremely broad interpretation was not even the intent of the drafters of this language. No, I would argue it probably was very intentional. But given the rapid timeline for the bill's likely passage, those answers may not be resolved before it hits the Senate floor for a vote. Some may wonder why an infrastructure bill primarily focused on topics like highways is even attempting to address as complex and evolving topic as digital privacy and cryptocurrency. The provision is actually buried in the section of the bill relevant to covering the cost of the proposals. In general, Bills that seek to offer new government services must explain how the government will pay for those services. This can be done through increasing taxes or by somehow improving tax compliance. The cryptocurrency provision in this bill is an attempt to do just that. The argument,
I just said.
Yeah. The argument is that by engaging in more rigorous surveillance of the cryptocurrency community and making it fall squarely under the jurisdiction of the IRS, the Biden administration will see more tax revenue flow from this community without actually increasing taxes, and thus be able to cover the $28 billion of its $2 trillion infrastructure plan. Basically, it's presuming that huge swaths of cryptocurrency users are engaged in mass tax avoidance without providing any evidence of that. It doesn't need to. It's kind of a given. Make no mistake, there's a clear and substantial harm in ratcheting up financial surveillance and forcing more actors within the blockchain ecosystem to gather data on users, which by design, it was designed not to do that. It was specifically with the stated purpose of, was built, architected with the stated purpose of not collecting this data, that the government's now saying, no, now legally, if you want to exist in the US, you will have to collect that data. The only thing they've yet to do is actually name the penalty. Well, then you're now under the jurisdiction of the IRS, and you'll now be found guilty of whatever the IRS punishments are for not complying with IRS demands, which is jail time. You can ask what was the lady who went to jail.
Leona Hemsley?
No, well, her too. No, the cooking lady.
Martha Stewart.
Martha Stewart.
No, she went to jail for lying about insider trade, basically for.
Oh yeah, she was insider trading. You're right. Fair point. Make no mistake. There's a clear and substantial. Oh yeah. So requiring new surveillance of everyday users of cryptocurrency. Oh, it says, including this provision in the infrastructure bill will do the four following things: require new surveillance of everyday users of cryptocurrency. Yeah. Well, they got into cryptocurrency to do exactly not that. Force software creators and others who do not custody cryptocurrency for their users to implement cumbersome surveillance systems on top of services in the United States. Create more honeypots of private information about cryptocurrency users that could attract malicious actors, and create more legal complexity to developing blockchain projects or verifying transactions in the United States, likely leading to more innovation moving overseas. Yes, it will force everyone out of the US who has anything to do with this. Absolutely, 100%, because they're not going to risk jail time now for their little cryptocurrency startup or any crypto startup, blockchain-based startup. Furthermore, it is impossible for miners to develop and developers to comply with these reporting requirements. Yep, by design. These parties have no way to gather that type of information. Exactly. That's right. And they know that. And that's why they're shutting the whole party down. The police have just showed up at your door. Hello, you got a party going on. Your party's over. Go home or you're going to be arrested. That's effectively what this is. And so in the short term, they will need to leave America completely, physically, geographically, and maybe even go to places that don't have whatever, bring the agreements to bring people back into the U.S. So they'll have to go. They'll likely
extradition.
They'll likely go to states that don't have extradition treaties with the U.S.
So
Elizabeth Warren is licking her lips right now on this, and Michael Saylor is putting on the boxing gloves. That's my simple read.
Well, here's the other problem: is you could have a crypto startup of any kind, right? And they now realize, shit, game over. We have to leave America. So bad news, everybody. We're moving to some state that doesn't have extradition treaty with America. So they move to Russia. Then but they still have their startup. And their startup has users in America. America's going to say, we need that data of those people. And that's what's going to force them to go to non-extradition. Because if they go to a country that has an extradition treaty with America, the IRS is going to say, that's nice. You went to Thailand. That's fine. You have users in America on your blockchain. We can see them here. We need all of their addresses and phone numbers. Or Thailand's going to arrest you due to the extradition treaty, send you back home, and we will put you in a jail cell until such time that you do hand over the names and emails of all of the American users on your blockchain. Simple.
Let me make two other points here, by the way. Because a lot of the stuff is owned by Americans, no matter where this thing gets moved, all the IRS, even if they moved it to some foreign country, the IRS will probably just put a question on the tax forms, which already generally exist, about like foreign bank accounts, and it will say, do you own any crypto anywhere? We don't care. And you could either, tell the truth or lie, but if they catch you, that's tax fraud for an American. So so you're still going to have, if everyone gets concerned about this, Americans basically hitting the exits, hitting the bid, so to speak, that would kill the price in the short term,
Mm-hmm.
And you don't even have to go to a weird country, by the way, in terms of extradition, not having extradition for financial crimes, because I don't think the Swiss will extradite on a financial crime to the United States. They'll extradite on murder or something, but they won't extradite on a financial crime. Nonetheless, if you've got Swiss bank accounts or any kind of Swiss, you're supposed to declare it. So I still think it's a problem.
I know Sweden will. Ask Julian Assange. So
John McAfee.
Yeah. That he was in Spain. Yeah. Well, that was financial. Yeah. That was precisely IRS. That was McAfee was an IRS case. They were trying to get it for taxes.
Well, Mongolia doesn't have an extradition treaty with the
US.
US.
There you go, Vinay. We're all moving to Mongolia, baby. Mongolia Valley or Silicon Eagles, or what are we going to call it when we set up our crypto community in Mongolia?
Already banned mining.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's right. Well, that's Inner Mongolia, by the way. This is separate. That's China's claimed territory of Mongolia, Inner Mongolia, which is where a lot of the coal-powered mining was happening previously. The bill could also create uncertainty about the ability to conduct cryptocurrency transactions directly with others via open source code, including smart contracts and decentralized exchanges, while remaining anonymous. The ability to transact directly with others anonymously is fundamental to civil liberties, as financial records provide an intimate window into a person's life. So this will force everyone doing anything in crypto to be fully anonymous and fully decentralized, is essentially what it's going to do. It's kind of like when you criminalize drugs or alcohol or prohibition or whatever, it's going to force everyone to go deep underground and be very deeply hidden and everything else. Yes, I may.
I was just going to say that this is also something that Nicholas is doing with his identity product, right? There's a level where, of course, from those that are not doing nefarious things, the people that want to be mostly hidden tend to be those that are, in my humble observation, those that want to, A, avoid taxes, or B, hide their wealth, or hide their dealings. So that's 3 points, right? But what Nicholas is speaking of is how to sort of also allow for that identity layer to be in there for those people that are just doing it because they don't want people in their business. You know what I'm saying? Like they're doing good stuff. They just don't want people in the business, in their business, in their affairs. Because like even now, like with the centralized bank, the bank sees all the transactions, but like my neighbor doesn't see all the transactions. And I think that's where there's like that sort of, I think that's where people start to get like a little bit crazy with the centralized, decentralized, and anonymity, because nothing's anonymous on the blockchain. I mean, you could trace it, you could look at it, you could find it. It's not hard. But if people have an assumption that it could be done, I think it'd be better to sort of recognize that even when I took my test for Chainalysis, it's not super complicated if you know what to look for, how to find it. And it's not very complicated to see where wallets are being used for nefarious things. And I think, Tyler, you know what I'm talking about. Like, I mean, if you see 3 or 4 transactions and you see normal amounts, and then all of a sudden out of nowhere you see this crazy amount going to this other wallet, and then you check that wallet and you notice that they're getting crazy amounts from somewhere else, you're going to start to wonder what that other wallet is that's receiving everything, right? You're going to start to just put that critical strategic thinking, that sort of investigative reporter thinking, and be like, well, okay, what's in that wallet? Who does that wallet belong to? And then by the context of that, you start to put together pieces of the puzzle and locate who the owner of that wallet is. And I don't think it's impossible to find. I think it's a misnomer that people think it's anonymity and it's not hard to find. I actually think that those individuals that want to find it have been in here for a while. And I think Charles was also kind of alluding to that as well, right? This is not something where they're not in here. They're in here already. They're just basically figuring out how to herd cats right now. What is the best strategy to not piss off the public, and not sort of create a revolution, but also how to keep people safe and keep the system or the new system evolving to the point that it serves the unbanked as well, not just those that are banked and not just the 1%, but those 99% that are unbanked and don't have that wealth and still need to generate that.
So the other approach is that it's there based on the wording of this bill or this part of the bill that's related to these provisions around cryptocurrency or crypto. Generally, it says the headline again reads, the cryptocurrency surveillance provision buried in the infrastructure bill is a disaster for digital privacy, meaning because they're going to force identity verification, which also dovetails with the point I'm making, which is the government is understanding the need for identity verification writ large on blockchains and in social networks. And
but this is why Nicholas' project is quite interesting, right? Because it's a bit like, do you want them to do your identity project, or do you want something where you could have at least some understanding of what the identity project is? Okay. So that would be my question.
Let me ping Nicholas into the room here real fast here. Let me get a link to the room if someone can stall for 10 seconds here.
Tyler, did you notice that there's in the upgrade of the app, there's some new ways to ping people into the room? When you click the bottom right plus, you have an option to share, tweet, and copy the link now. It's really nice and seamless. So you could actually tweet it out too.
Yeah, I'm not on the app. I'm on Club Deck.
Yeah, he's using Club Deck.
So
it's okay. I'll do it for you.
Yeah, I just pinged him, and we'll see if he can pop in. It's late over there in California, but you're right. It's right up his alley. So worst case, we'll have him probably in here tomorrow at this time, because this is so perfectly right up his alley. So until Nicholas comes back here, the next big story at this very moment is, oh shoot, hold on one second. Where did that go? There we go. That was that one. Next one is a look at Fuck You Pay Me, a Glassdoor-like service where creators can review brands they have worked with and share ad rates. This is from the New York Times. Fed up with imbalance between online influencers and brands, Lindsay Lee Lugren and Isha Meira created a platform to change that with the very beautiful name of Fuck You Pay Me. The app with the unprintable name that wants to give power to creators. Fed up, yeah. So that it's from the New York Times, so it's paywalled. I think I can find an unpaywalled version here real quick here.
Hey, Tyler, I can get you anything on the New York Times that you want, and I can just convert it to a PDF and send it to you whenever you need it.
I've got another way. I've just been lazy about doing it. But Fuck You Pay Me functions as a Glassdoor for influencers, where the creators can leave reviews of brands and say how much they got paid, basically, and get other critical information for negotiating sponsored content for deals. The aim, to have creators be paid more equitably. That's really all you need to know. And Taylor Lorenz on Twitter says, there has been a huge move toward more pay transparency in the creator world. Fuck You Pay Me is part of that. Founded by a content creator and former Facebook data scientist, they came out of a tech startup incubator program launched in beta last month. Fantastic. And an Australian court rules that AI can be considered an inventor on patent filings days after South Africa granted a patent in which an AI was designated as an inventor. IP lawyer says decision is bad because the last thing we need is robot patent trolls. Because they're right about that. You can start creating thousands of patent applications based on GPT-3 and things like that, and just starting patenting literally anything that we can't even begin to imagine. And that is the negative dystopian potential for that. You get GPT-4 when it comes out, you tell it to suck in every patent that ever existed, and then ask it to make new patents for things that have not yet been, created, and it can do that at scale, meaning 1 million patent applications simultaneously. So that's the power of digital, which is it's exponential. It's not linear. So Facebook to require all U.S. on-campus staff. Does that mean at their HQ? Is that what they are referring to, on campus? Oh, yes, it does. Facebook to require all U.S. on-campus staff to wear masks starting August 4th. That's tomorrow. regardless of vaccination status, citing rising COVID cases and local regulations. Facebook will begin requiring all of its employees to wear masks when on campuses in the U.S., regardless of an employee's vaccination status.
Tyler?
Yes.
The vaccination, pardon my throat right now, but the vaccination rate in San Francisco area is really skyrocketing rapidly, and it's increasing in Southern California as well. So I think it's a pretty good preemptive move and precedent that's being started at this point.
Good to hear. What do we think about companies requiring masks of employees regardless of vaccination status?
Tyler?
Yes?
This is a very interesting one because after your long marathon room last night, I popped into a social room, and Professor Asif is in the audience as well. Mm-hmm. The one thing, or he might be on stage, the one thing that's happening now, and I tweeted it, I pinned it to my tweet last night late about the fact that they're stating that we should be more concerned with Lambda, because Lambda is the one that they're saying in Japan is going to be like the interloper because it's showing signs of vaccine resistance. So Lambda is the one that came from Latin America that's in Canada. It was found in Canada. And the thing is that the U.S. could have both Lambda and Delta at the same time, which is why the U.S. is going to be in probably a big clusterfuck, because they could have both of them simultaneously this winter, this fall. However, the challenge here is that Lambda is the one that no one's talking about yet, but it is the one that is also resistant to these vaccines. So to Rhonda's point, it's great to see the uptick, but I also know here in Holland, they are not allowing travel of Europe. Like, if you're not an American citizen in Europe, you cannot travel into the U.S. They already blocked it. You cannot. You have to either be married to someone, you have to have residency. You cannot enter the U.S. from Europe, at least from Netherlands specifically, and probably the Schengen region. And I have a feeling that this is what's happening, is that the U.S. is probably being hopefully proactive to recognize that Lambda will come next.
We're so segmented from county to county, state to state. We're like 50 different nations.
Yeah, I know. I'm from New York.
No. But I'm saying right now, I've never seen such division as I've ever seen in this moment. But the irony is the article I did not post. Do you know what group is being singled out for the rise in San Francisco currently? Of all groups, what group do you think it is? I'll give anybody $50 if they can guess this without looking.
Go ahead, trivia, Jeopardy music, please.
Jeopardy music.
Jeopardy music, please.
Okay, and restate the question. Hold on 1 second. Let me get the volume up here.
Restate the question with the Jeopardy music.
Okay. Which group right now in San Francisco is responsible for the uptick in the virus cases? Please answer. You have 50 seconds for $50.
Okay. Who has the highest uptick? Which demographic or cohort has the highest uptick?
Or nationality?
I would say South Asian. I would say South Asian.
Nationality.
Indian.
Well, Indian, South Asian.
Or age?
It's children.
Children.
Oh, in number of cases, in number of COVID cases reported
in San Francisco currently.
Yeah, in number of reported COVID cases, it's going to be youth.
Millennials is the answer.
Yeah, the sad part about that is in Holland is having the same challenge as well. It's the age group between 21 and 28, 29 that are just like, fuck this shit. I mean, they're the ones faking the QR codes, which is kind of stupid, but they just don't want to be told what to do. And actually, the prisons are getting really full in Holland, and we have a problem because of that, because the people that they're arresting from these protests are all between the ages of like 18 and 28. So there's another big pandemic underneath that, which is, if you, and specifically Holland, speaking for Holland, they're very free with their teenagers and their kids. That's kind of they're allowed to do a lot. The parents don't necessarily discipline them so heavily here. So now what they're feeling is also a product of the lack of kind of how they discipline them growing up, because they don't rein them in too much. And now they're kicking themselves a bit because now the prisons are overflowing with the age group of 18 to 28. And they actually were forced to reopen because there was so much struggle with that age group.
Millennials, Ame?
What was that, Rhonda?
The Zillennials, the people.
Zillennials, sorry, that's right. It's the one before. It's the one younger than them, right? It's the one younger than them.
China.
Yeah.
I have a related news.
Okay.
China, Wuhan. started to lock down again and to test all their residents as the COVID-19 returns.
Yeah,
they need to do Delta.
Yes, they're starting to lock down again. It's in 9 different prefectures now.
Yeah, Wuhan is the origin, right? Of the coronavirus.
Yeah, so but the Delta origin was actually in Nanjing at the airport with 5 air hostesses, and it's now spread to 9 prefectures.
Yep. So
including
it's
Wuhan.
Like said, I'm sure the people there will have trauma again. They just walk out of it. Okay. Anyway, wish them good luck.
Yeah, the issue is that Delta is a whole different animal, which it's going to be interesting to see how they combat it in China, and so it'll be a daily update for weeks to come. So, pardon me. There was a couple of crypto folks who had their hands up that I think some of them might have been able to get up on stage. I'm not sure. Russ, yeah.
I'm well versed in a lot of crypto. I've just been active since 2017. I know a lot about blockchain technology. I was part of the first SEC qualified token offering in the US, which is a Blockstack. So I know a lot about regulations and such. So if you need any questions answered regarding anything, to do with crypto, I can do my best. Obviously there are people who know more than me, but I do know a lot.
Have you heard anyone talking about the infrastructure bill provisions related to crypto regulations, forcing all crypto startups in the U.S. to reveal the identities and addresses of anyone touching their service?
You hit the nail on the head, I guess, because we're just a bunch of millennials just kicking it. So we're definitely not going to read something. So here's the thing.
Yeah, unless they print it inside the Doritos bag. Yeah, no one's going to notice it.
We're just going to keep our billions hidden from these assholes. That's all I have to say.
You might be looking for real estate in interesting parts of the world in the near future. So
yeah, I heard it was, what was the one written down? Mongolia?
Mongolia, yes, Mongolia. Start to set up that camp over there.
Yeah,
if I have to, I'll move the whole gang over there.
Somebody's going to cater to that audience, by the way. Yeah, go ahead.
Tyler, that's a very interesting dynamic. And Russ, thank you for sharing that point of view, because you said something very eloquently. And paraphrasing, I feel like there's this battle between young and old going on. And it's not, I'm not saying it in a negative way, I'm saying it in an observation way. Because Tyler, to the point of the young are young, they could be quite agile and swiftly move to different places without much of a drama, because they don't have kids, they don't have mortgages, they don't have anything, right?
Yeah.
So to Russ's point, he could uplift his whole freaking establishment and take it to where he wants to go, right?
Yeah.
The challenge here is that I feel like this is a bit of like Dungeons and Dragons and Game of Thrones. It's like we have the young, new evolution of innovation and wanting to move the ball of the society forward. As we've talked before, that we need to start doing products for those that are 10, 12 years old right now. But there's still those individuals in power and in positions that are not really considering that future. And they're still thinking that their way of being and their way of doing still is going to work in a society that's going to look very, very different, even post-pandemic. We see this with social commerce. We see this with all the delivery apps. We see this with all of the Etsy's, the Shopify's. You see that there's a whole paradigm shifting. And I feel like there's a group that's afraid to lose power and control. And as a result of that, they're scrambling to do it in the best way they know possible, which is regulations and red tape and laws and all of that stuff, right? But in the future, how will those look 20 years from now for that 12-year-old today when they're 32? What will that world look like then? And that's where I think I empathize with what Russ is saying, because I think there's a disconnect with those generations, and I think that's what's creating all this crazy TikTok uptick on crypto and the whole Instagram and the social commerce that you speak of on a frequent basis. But love to hear what you think about that one.
Yeah, it's where the whole younger folks are getting more and more geographically untethered, and it's just there's less constraints more than it's kind of weird. I remember going to Tokyo the first time pre-smartphone. 90 94-ish, 93-ish. And you felt like you were going to a different planet. I felt like I was going to the goddamn moon because there was no way to connect home with my parents, and keep them updated on what's going on. Like even cyber cafes barely existed back. Skype, barely existed.
You needed to send postcards, right?
Yeah, it was postcards. Yeah. And the idea now that you can FaceTime for practically free at any moment back home, anywhere in the world, it just changes the whole game fundamentally. And it's, the world just feels way, 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 way smaller. And there's just way, way less friction to being utterly mobile anywhere you want to be, anytime you want to be there. And, the flights are a third of the cost as they ever were. And Airbnb makes it dead simple to get an apartment in any city on the planet, where that actually was incredible friction, especially in countries where you didn't speak the language, as I didn't when I first arrived in Japan. Even finding a place to stay was a remarkable challenge. And there was actual physical paper books called Lonely Planet, where you had to go through there and, look up the city, and they had recommendations of 10 places in a city of 20 million people where you could find a place to stay for the night. And you had to go walk up there, or maybe try and call them on the phone, and they don't speak English, and you go, it's just, my God, now you can just bing, Airbnb in Havana, Cuba, boom, got an apartment before, 5 minutes. I got a place to stay for a month, any city in the world. It's so incredibly different. It's wild. So yeah, younger people can get up and go anywhere. And to that point, governments used to have control and constraints based on their knowing that there's friction of you relocating. And that friction is diminishing by the day. And so the point is correct, which is these government historical constraints of your geography are just becoming less and less relevant. I know I get my mail is digitized, my money is digitized, everything's digitized. And I've been doing that since the 90s. But now I think everyone else is realizing there's the frictions that used to keep you in place of your paper mail that used to come, and now you have to figure out a way to receive it and check it. That's gone. All that shit's gone.
Tyler, It's super interesting you said this, because one of my teachers, which I've shared before, is Belarus, but he's grown up in Sweden. And he has been saying this, like, I've been in this space for a pretty long time, but my point is I've been following him, and when he was programming at 9 years old, so he's a bit of a prodigy when it comes to gaming and coding. And he said it himself in some of his live streams, like about 4 or 5 years ago. He was like, look, by the time we get to where we're going, people are going to start to realize they're going to have a choice where they want to live. And that's going to make other countries realize that they could actually attract people based on how they navigate what they offer them, right?
Or on their values.
Exactly.
You're no longer forced to live in the country if you don't agree with their values.
Correct. And that's what he was talking about.
I got into a huge, I didn't mean it to be a huge debate or a heated point. And Cheryl was with me in the room, and there was somebody who's clearly doesn't like America living in America. I'm like, hey, there's a lot of other countries out there with a lot of different views. And if you don't like America, you don't have to live. I'm telling you, as somebody who left a decade ago, partially on the values point. I have different values, and I move around based on, jurisdictions of the world that are more in line with my values. And if I found a place where I didn't feel like my values were in sync with that country, I would move again. I'm in Thailand today. My values might change. Their values might change. And if either of those happen to a degree where I no longer feel comfortable, I'm going to up and move to somewhere where I do feel more comfortable. I no longer... So my point is, Tyler, the person I said that to as an American was like, how dare you? You're telling me love it or leave it. And you remember, Cheryl?
You need a very patriotic soundbite. You know that. You need a very patriotic sound thread. Because
but one thing regards to this IRS thing, as in the IRS thing, right? I'm sure you guys know that American citizen, wherever you go, you have to abide to that, right?
Have a right to what?
You have to abide to the
we
laws
have to pay
in
global
US.
taxes.
No, you have to pay taxes is the only thing you have to do.
Yeah.
So I've got 4 more countries that don't have extradition with the US.
There you go. Go ahead, Vinay. Where are we moving to?
Russ, take notes, Russ. Russ, take notes.
Russ, take notes. You've got Russia.
No.
Russia.
Moldova.
Yep. Moldova's fantastic. Go ahead.
Yeah. Chad.
Moldova's amazing.
Chad and South Sudan.
Yep. It looks like we're moving to Moldova. There we go.
Okay, I didn't know
I
you
told
were
you guys,
giving me
you could
options
all go
for
to
moving. My
Switzerland if it's a
bad.
financial crime. Switzerland's probably the nicest.
You're sure about they don't extradite for financial issues?
I'm pretty sure. Isn't
Where
that
in
what is it?
Switzerland? Are you
No,
asking
no.
about Switzerland?
I think for financial they don't. But I'm going to check for you. I'll let you know.
Financial
So I
crimes.
check. I
Switzerland
checked.
is.
I
Switzerland
checked
has
at.
been Switzerland has been very, very interesting because in the past 10 years, because living in Amsterdam, I do freelance work all over Europe. And Switzerland's a very interesting one because Switzerland they've been very diplomatically getting rid of the Americans from Switzerland. It's really messed up to say, but it's the truth. What they're doing is they're just making it much, much harder for Americans to even try to work or set foot anything in there. And that's, I think, in my humble opinion, how they're managing to keep themselves still neutral. Okay, because most of the time, it's the regulations of the U.S.
We got the point. Vinay, what's your point?
Yeah, so I checked on Switzerland. They have a full extradition treaty with the U.S. and specifically to financial crimes, the U.S. government has to prove that that particular crime has caused material damage in the U.S. So if it's just like an income tax avoidance, Switzerland will not extradite. But if it's caused like a Ponzi scheme and caused losses, then it is extraditable.
So if you're a crypto startup, they might get you. But if you're an individual using a crypto, they might not.
Not if you live
I'm
in
a startup,
so no,
Zug in Switzerland.
Moldova. By the way, Russ, I've been to Moldova. Chisinau, the capital. Holy cow, is that the cheapest city in the world to live? Absolutely one of the cheapest cities in the world to live.
Can I interject?
Yeah.
I do actually side with the guy who was pissed off. Like can we curse in here? I'll just refrain.
Yeah.
But like getting angry about leaving because America's known for being a melting pot and fighting for freedom. So, I mean, come on. Like, I think we'll fight first, and if we can't win, then we'll leave. But we're still going to fight first.
Right. That was the person's point. Essentially, you just framed it very eloquently, which is, no, I don't agree with what's going on here, and we're going to fight. And I said, yeah, you can do that, and then rather than start burning down federal buildings and tearing down statues, you might decide it might be a better use of your lifetime to find a geography that's more copacetic with your values.
I mean, if we want people to pay, though, like the people who put us in the suffering, we want to stick around.
Oh, if you're already invested, yeah, you're in a bad relationship. You've already got 5 years in that relationship. You don't just want to end that thing. I gotcha.
No, I want to watch them suffer.
Right. You're in a toxic relationship with your own country. There you go.
Right. It's like an abusive girlfriend that I just keep going back to.
You're codependent.
Oh, I'm very happy.
Yeah, let's hear about it. I want to hear about the grievances. Like I'm excited. This is interesting.
Well, apparently, his government partner is looking into his phone when he's sleeping.
It has to do with end-to-end encryption and trying to get rid of that, and the way they try to get rid of it, it's like layering it under like child sex trafficking and saying they're protecting you. In actuality, they're just trying to remove your right to be a human by removing your ability to have any sort of privacy.
Okay, next big headline. It's a great point, and I appreciate the lighthearted nature of this, but a rather serious point. The next big headline is right.
Carl, I'm surprised you haven't covered the Tencent.
We'll get there.
Today.
It's in here. I got it.
Oh, yes, there.
Coming.
Okay.
Yeah. Also, we covered the Australian court. We covered Facebook masks. The next one's from Bloomberg, and Bloomberg's jumping in a week late. And we've been covering this as it was cracking down in real time. I did ping in David Chang to give the expert opinion on this, but Bloomberg jumping in with the hot headline that Xi Jinping's capitalist smackdown sparks a $1 trillion reckoning. That's true. However, the kind of buy headline is an in-depth look at the political motivations behind China's tech crackdown as Xi pursues progressive authoritarianism at the expense of international capital. Xi Jinping smiled and hinted at a policy bombshell that would soon roil stock markets from Shanghai to New York. And I don't blame them for thinking that. That was my first impression too, actually, was, it's a power grab of why they're cracking down on all these tech companies. And there is an element of that, apparently. However, we've come to realize, talking with very intelligent friends of ours on the ground, Chinese folks in Beijing who are geeks themselves, who are incredibly bright and incredibly connected. And their take on what's happening is more akin, he referenced metaphorical of Caesar, who is more a champion of the people than the money and the banks in their own empire. And that one of the absolute driving motivators is addressing the birth rate, believe it or not. And that's something I've not seen a single of these articles like Bloomberg, and there were others yesterday. We've seen one every day for the past week of their parroting similar points of this is an authoritarian power grab at the expense of international capital. And it's the declining birth rate factor holds up to scrutiny. And the inside of China, and I've done my own further investigation into this, I don't doubt David Cheng for 2 seconds. But I just wanted to see for my own self, kind of get an actual smell of what people in mainland China are saying about this tech crackdown on the ed tech companies, which was tens of billions of dollars, estimated at $100 billion worth of value that was lost in privatizing, removing public funding of ed tech companies, of which there are many. And one individual alone a single individual lost $15 billion that they had invested into one ed tech company, a Chinese individual who used to be a school teacher, believe it or not, ironically. So the sentiment on the ground in mainland China is they're wildly applauding Xi Jinping cracking down on the ed tech companies, because to them, that is one of the expenses in their life, is educating their children, and the money is going to these ed tech companies. So if you can lower the cost of the education of your children, Chinese people absolutely applaud that. There's few things you could do to get Chinese parents more happy and excited than lowering the cost of educating children. And that's what they've done. And so the US is fundamentally not understanding that. They're not understanding that Chinese parents are wildly appreciative, wildly enthusiastic. It's Christmas come early in July in reducing one of the biggest costs of life in China, which is the education of their child. And so that was done to increase the declining birth rate. And about 6 weeks ago, China did, for the first time in 3 years, they avoided it for 2 years and they couldn't avoid it for 3, announced the birth rate data. And it was, perhaps not surprisingly, shockingly, a kind of a wild announcement that the birth rate is declining faster than anyone expected. The average age is older than the US and rapidly increasing. And that's an existential problem to the state of the CCP. It's an existential threat to the government. If something's going to dethrone the CCP, it's this declining birth rate. If that left unabated, they have to address it. They have to fix it. Other countries have the same problem. They don't feel the existential threat of fixing it because they're democracies. They get voted out in 4 years anyways. Doesn't matter. There's very few things that could now challenge the CCP in mainland China. And this declining birth rate of an economy collapsing, and that's what happens if you leave a declining birth rate economically unfettered. So they're addressing it. They're fixing it. And one of the things they're fixing it with a fury and with an urgency. And one of the things to do is what's stopping people from having children? Oh, the cost of having children. Oh, the cost of educating children. Fixed. What's next? The cost of housing. And now they are. And here's the evidence. Here's the proof that I know I'm correct. Because if my premise is correct, that they did this to address the birth rate, as I'm claiming, then we could then say, if this is correct, that they crack down on these ed tech companies, not for the authoritarian purposes, as Bloomberg says in their headlines, as a political motivation of progressive authoritarianism, that in fact it's just to fix the declining birth rate. Then if it is about fixing the declining birth rate, then they would also fix the next likely thing that is the major expense of having more children, which is housing. And guess what? They're now cracking down on the fucking housing. Oh, what do you fucking know?
Did you short anything, Tyler?
Yes. So we now have the actual fucking proof that they're doing this to fix the birth rate, because they're now consistently going after the specific areas that are the frictions to having children, which is the cost of education and now the cost of housing. So we even predicted what their next move would be, and we were correct. And we can do that because we know what their fucking motive is. It's fixing the fucking birth rate. It's nothing. It's not the key purpose of this is perfectly understandable. And we can even predict what their next move is going to be. Yes. Because we understand what's actually fucking happening. Bloomberg, pull your fucking head out of your ass. Do a little homework. Call somebody in Beijing and say, what's going on over there? Why are they doing this? There's not one mention of the word birth rate in this article or in the TechCrunch article that was written 48 hours ago. And the TechCrunch article also made the same assessment that, by the way, count me guilty as charged. My first assumption, I will even say Cal's first assumption was, this seems like on the face of it, an authoritarian power grab. That's what it seems like on the surface. If you aren't on the ground, if you don't have friends on the ground actually telling you what's actually going on. By the way, being an American who lives in Asia and works in Europe for a decade, more than a decade now, I can tell you, Europeans also often have a fundamental misunderstandings of the motives of Trump, for example, and American politics generally. They think they know what's going on, but unless you've actually lived there, you don't really know why Lindsey Graham is doing some of the whack-ass shit that he's doing, unless you actually know the complicated nature of the relationships between the blue states and the red states. So
that's what makes these rooms very good.
That's what makes Tech News Around the World so fucking amazing. Right. And that's why we can look at Bloomberg and TechCrunch and be like, come on, guys. It's 2021. Pick up the phone, call somebody on the ground. And well, in all fairness, China has removed all the Western journalists out of China. So they no longer have friends on the ground there. Their friends are right across the border in Hong Kong, which, by the way, is a 15-minute train ride from Shenzhen. So you're barely outside of mainland now. But in fairness, you don't have journalists on the ground to call, but you probably know somebody. They've got 1.5 billion people. You must know somebody over there that you can call.
So Tyler?
Yeah.
So absolutely agree with you 100%. And to the point of all of these journalists not looking at the data, and I think I mentioned this, the 14th five-year plan by the Chinese government came in April, and the English translation came in May, and they had actually telegraphed every single one of these moves because they would actually said it. And I've been reading that document. There's a couple of other things that kind of talks about that. The Belt and Road Initiative, building a strong domestic consumer market is central to the 14th plan. Delinking from global financial investments is another. So they couldn't care less if the VCs lose money because it's clearly laid out in that 14th five-year plan. I'll tweet a link to it, guys, but it's an amazing document.
I'll challenge you a little bit. I think they do care. It's just relative to fixing the declining birth rate, relative to the bigger long-term picture, right? They're thinking as everyone knows they do. They're thinking very long-term. They're thinking very big picture, and they're addressing the very huge existential threat, similar to climate change, huge existential threat. And when we were in this room yesterday, and we said, there's solutions like carpet bombing bamboo seeds, in the bamboo belt and grow. And the first objection is, you're gonna have bamboo in foreign soils that are not accustomed to that species of bamboo. Well, is that not a price we're willing to pay to fix climate change? Well, hey, good news, everybody. We fixed climate change. Human existence gets to continue. Bad news, though. There's bamboo happening in places it didn't used to happen. Oh my goodness. Oh my God. What have we done? Why did we think?
But if the humans' habits don't change, you still have to look for the next solution after the next solution after the next solution. It will still come back.
It's Tyler. I think it's our idealists seeking, decision-making processes. That's why we can't make our minds up about masks or vaccines, because we need every answer to be so absolute before we even make the decision.
Well, no, but we've also, here's my take, is we've become prone to verbosity and not prone to action. There's a notable lack of people that are now prone to action, and we talk shit and we don't do shit. And there's the doers. By the way, we had this huge headline yesterday, or last time we met, 12 hours ago, about Gorillas, the delivery company. I believe they're based out of Berlin. And they are looking to grow. They're expecting to have, they launched within the past year. They're growing faster than nearly any company in the history of companies. And the journalist wrote the article about, this company is growing so fast, it's a problem. And will it be around in a year? And, we found out of the 2,000 employees, we found 9 disgruntled employees who were all paid minimum wage. And they say negative things. And this is a journalist working at a dying publication who can't get 5 cents of fundraising from any investor on the planet. And yet this Gorillas company is looking to raise $2 billion and is likely to have a $20 billion valuation after the first year of business. And now this journalist who works at an actual dying company is critiquing one of the fastest growing companies of all time on the premise of it might not be around. No, what might not be around is your fucking tech blog. And it's all of this analysis and talking, and Gorillas building fast. 10-minute delivery is the company. 10-minute delivery. You know how difficult that is? And they're doing it. And the customers love it. In fact, they're freaking out about it. And they've inspired competitors, and VCs are investing in their competitors. That's when you know you've got something good. When you're really onto something, you will have competitors, and your competitors will get fundraising, and you'll get fundraising. That means you've got something, and that means you're doing shit. You're not talking shit. And this journalist is just talking shit and is going to talk shit into the grave. She's going to talk shit and not do the necessary steps of leaving the tech publication, going over to Substack or her own platform, creating an email list and building her own audience and building her, why? Oh my God, don't get me started with this. And what's wrong with people these days? Anyway, okay, next headline. London-based Palta, which develops health and wellness apps, raises $100 million. What a shock. Another health tech company raising money from Tiger Global. Who could have guessed? The health tech's exploding. If you're doing a decent health tech company in 2021, you will get funding. The next headline is YouTube trials premium light tier for €7 per month, about $8 a month in Europe, giving viewers ad-free viewing on the web, iOS, Android, smart TVs, and game consoles. Currently being piloted in parts of Europe, namely Scandinavia. It's specifically the Nordics and Benelux. And Google is piloting a more affordable premium subscription. The only difference is, you remove the ads, but unlike the real premium, which I happen to have and I love, is you don't get YouTube music. You don't get the ability to play videos in the background. Like when you're on Twitter, the YouTube video plays in the background, which is fantastic. Or you can turn your phone screen off and put it in your pocket and listen to it like a podcast. I love that. So, but you get to skip all the ads for about $8 a month. Next big headline. Latin America now has at least 23 unicorns. There we go, which collectively has raised $15 billion, with 15 raising VCs this year. 40% of all VC funding in 2020 went into fintech. There you go, as it does, because that's the first layer of the plumbing of the future city of your Silicon Valley of Latin America. Is you don't start building with the e-commerce. You start with the finance layer that enables the e-commerce. Got it? It's rather simple. So when you go into emerging markets, you want to invest in the fintech, as Mobana is doing in Africa. It's just the way it is. So after the fintech layer is in place, you can start adding on all the other products and services that are enabled by the fintech layer. So the next big headline is NovaKid, an app that offers online English language classes to kids age 4 to 12, raises $35 million by Owl Ventures. And again, it's an ed tech. It's English language app. Fantastic. NovaKid. God knows what a beautiful project to be doing at this moment. Duolingo's doing the same, of course, but they're doing lots of other languages as well. But I certainly applaud anyone who's doing English language learning apps, and I think it's still a huge, tremendous opportunity because there is not yet a clear, absolute market winner for an English language app for the planet, essentially. But of course, you have to have the native language that goes into English. Anyway, the next big article is from TechCrunch. Finite State, a supply chain security startup. As we know, supply chains have been disrupted as of late. So a supply chain security startup that helps uncover security flaws lands $30 million. What a surprise. On the heels, in the wake of all of these supply chain vulnerabilities that are being attacked by ransomwares, not a surprise that a security startup's raising money. So you can add security startups, edtech startups, pretty much foolproof. There's more demand than supply. There's more customers than there are startups. Like by 10,000 to 1. So if you make a decent cybersecurity company or edtech company, you will get funding, or a fintech in the developing world. This is not complicated stuff, folks. Nikya, an Indian e-commerce startup for beauty products, filed for an IPO and seeks to raise $70 million at a valuation of $4 billion. There you go. India has passed the fintech layer. They're now doing the commerce layer, and now you have an e-commerce company IPOing. You see, the process is quite simple. That's where India's at in their development. Microsoft Desktop as a Service Windows 365 Cloud PC is generally available and costs between $20 and $162 per month per user based on cores, RAM, and storage. Big whoop. Pro-Trump social network GETTR is awash with Islamic State propaganda, including graphic videos of beheadings and memes of militant executing Trump himself. They're creating deep fakes of beheading Trump on the pro-Trump social network. Good times. I bet they didn't see this one coming when they thought, free speech, don't cancel us. We're against canceling, no canceling. How dare you cancel something I say? You can't stop people from saying stuff they don't want to say. Oh, shit, here comes ISIS with deepfakes of beheading our dear leader. You can't do that. Let's cancel them. Or are they going to leave it and stay true to their values of not canceling? To be continued. Let's see how GETTR responds now that they've created their utopia of uncensorship, and then they find out what kind of Pandora's box of anarchy they're really opening. And now they're getting a real taste of unfettered free speech, of deep fakes of their dear leader being beheaded. And let's see how they respond. When are they going to applaud the free speech expressions of ISIS on their platform? To be determined. Let's see what some of the quotes here. Just a few weeks after launching, pro-Trump social media network GETTR is full of pro-ISIS terrorist propaganda. So it's essentially a platform for terrorists, both domestic and international. Oh, that's a harsh tweet. Eric Geller says GETTR did not respond to repeated requests for comment about jihadi material being shared on its network. I can't wait for that response, by the way, from Jason Miller, who's the creator of the app. This happens to every new social platform that says it won't moderate content. It's like opening a store for bragging that you won't hire security. Yep. ISIS has been very quick to exploit GETTR, according to Politico. Another win for unmoderated online communities. Next headline. South Korean game developer Netmarble says it will acquire Hong Kong-based Spinex Games, which develops social casino games, for $2.19 billion. Here it is. Current and former employees at German grocery delivery startup Gorillas describe arbitrary firings and exploitation of riders and warehouse workers. So the real interesting point in this whole article is the last paragraph, where it says it concedes. It's making the point that they spoke to 9 disgruntled former employees who were minimum wage paid. So perhaps not a surprise they were disgruntled. And the company, even in Germany, you have a probationary period when you hire somebody to decide if you're going to employ them. And during that probationary period, you can fire them at will for no reason, with no warning. It's a probation. It's like a 3-week testing period or what have you, to see if they're a fit for your company or your needs for them. And if you're doing 10-minute delivery, let's just think for a second, who, without making any real big judgments here, Would Willie Schroll, Willie, I imagine you're around 50 years old, right? Just a something.
Yeah, 50 plus, yes.
There you go. So, Willie, I'm imagining you're not going to apply to work at a 10-minute delivery company to deliver things around Berlin in less than 10 minutes.
Only as an extreme experience.
Yes, unless as a replacement for a gym, perhaps, and maybe you'd be willing to do it for free, just for the cardiovascular workout that it would require. Ken, I imagine you're not going to apply for this either. And Faraz, I'm just going to take a wild stab and think you're not interested in the 10-minute delivery startup. This is obviously physically intensive work. And so the idea that some people are going to apply who shouldn't be applying. And some of those people are going to be fired during their probationary period because they're not able to do what most people who apply are going to physically need to do, because they're obviously have metrics that they expect you to be able to deliver in 10 minutes. And if you're not able to deliver in 10 minutes, they're probably going to fire you. And you might not have for some people, delivering 10 minutes physically is doable. For other people, it's not.
This is like the new bike messenger job.
Right. But most people didn't apply for bike messenger jobs because they realized they suck at riding bikes. But in this case, I think the company needs to do, I think I figured out their problem. Hey, Gorilla's founder, CEO, I have a message for you. Definitely promote yourself as being physically demanding work and physically challenging, and start with a test of an actual obstacle course at the beginning of the process before you ever send anybody out on
I've got the headline.
Yeah.
I've got the headline.
Go ahead,
Do
Tina.
you like extreme sports?
Yes.
You're going to love this job.
Yes. There it is. Tina from the...
They're retail athletes.
Yes. So, if you have a freaking obstacle course, that would be fantastic PR, by the way. This company is so demanding, they have an actual boot camp obstacle course to see if you're fit to be an employee. And you know why I think this is a good idea? Because I had a startup where I did I should say it's Jason's startup, really. He founded it. And we had to hire 200 people nearly immediately. We raised $20 million from Sequoia and Elon Musk and Mark Cuban and everybody else. And we had to hire a whole bunch of people really quickly. And we were one of these fast growth tech startups, very demanding. And like an Olympic athlete level of dedication required, and focus and determination and grit. And you're going to have emotional breakdowns. It's that demanding. As Uber, I had a lot of friends who worked at Uber. Uber was the same way. You get into these incredibly rocket ship companies, there's tiers, right? There's a lot of breakdowns, emotional breakdowns. You don't have time to eat dinner with your family, or you're breaking. You have to break up with your partner, your loved ones. You don't have time to have a relationship outside of work when you're working at a startup like this. And I was incredibly upfront about this in recruiting people. And I did something truly remarkable that I'm going to share one of my very best tips with everybody listening for the next 2 minutes here, which is when people would apply, I would tell them, do you have nothing else going on in your life at all? You have nothing else, no other priorities in your life, because this job, I have a lot of best friends who are looking for work right now, and I would never, ever let them work here because it's way too demanding. Even though they need to work, I will not hire them here. This job is so intensely demanding that you will cry, guaranteed, within the first week. Now, why would anybody be so insane to even consider the rest of this conversation, to consider working here? Because if you feel that you have not lived up to your full potential as a human being, and you need somebody like an Olympic coach to kick your ass to jump in the pool at 4 a.m., even though you really don't want to, and you need somebody to beat the shit out of you, to work 10 times harder than you ever have before, to push you to be the better person that you know you can be. If that's where you are at in your phase in your life, I don't know. Only you know. I can't begin to make that judgment. I'm not even going to try. But we will just be the, professional, hard hitting drill sergeant. If that's what you need at this moment in your life, because you feel like you are not living up to your full potential, this might be a good fit for you. But it will be the hardest work you will ever do in your entire life. You will cry regularly. You will think, what the hell did I just get myself into? And if you think I'm exaggerating, hold that thought. Hey, Jeremy, come over here for a second. Thanks. Hey, Jeremy, how long have you been here? 2 months. What did I tell you when you applied here? You told me it'd be the hardest work I ever did in my life, and I would cry every week, and I would, lose friends and loved ones because I don't have enough time to have meals together with them. Jeremy, was I exaggerating? No, sir, you were not. Thank you, Jeremy.
Tyler,
and then hold on. And then I would tell them, listen, go home, think about it. If you're interested, DM me tomorrow and let me know, because only you know. I don't know. I don't know if you're in that phase in your life. For most people, they're not in that phase in their life where they want that drill sergeant like grilling. Some people are in that phase in their life where they, you know what, that's what I need in my life right now, is someone to just really be a boot camp drill sergeant and push me beyond my limits. Now, here's my point is, what % of people do you think messaged me the next day to say, I want this?
Not a lot.
90%. So,
very interesting, Tyler.
The point is when they came in, they now have the expectation. The expectation is properly set.
Got it.
And they understand fully what they're getting into, and they understand it's not that we're just mean and we're, whatever. There's a reason for everything. And they now transparently understand, have a much better grasp of what's going on in a 360 perspective. So you don't have when employees do burn out, and they do, and some do burn out after 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 weeks, they don't go to the press and say, this company's so mean. Well, no, we told you we're mean when you joined. We told you we're gonna, kick your ass. That's what you signed up for. You said you wanted that. My point to guerrillas is, do something similar. Make an actual obstacle court boot camp with a drill sergeant with a whistle saying, is that all you got? You're not fit for this company. Get out of here, you loser. And do that in front of, make an obstacle course in front of your HQ, buy a little piece of land next to your office, build an actual obstacle course, and make it a big game show and find out who's fit to work there. Yeah, go ahead.
Tyler, this is really fascinating that you bring this up, because I'm a Bikram teacher and I get this all the time. Bikram's like the CrossFit of yoga. It's like, we don't mess around when it comes to results, but we demonstrate that in the way we teach and the way we were trained in training with about 300 other people. We were actually pushed to the limits, which kind of would scare people. We were 315 people in Hawaii in a room at the Ilikai, and we were being trained 2 hours, 2 times a day, 2 hours at 55 to 65 degrees Celsius with a humidity of 67%, because we were going to be hot Bikram yoga teachers. And in order to prove that we weren't going to die, we had to be put through the test of how much we could handle. And it's really wild, because people from an outside, oh my God, that's kind of fucking crazy. Are you nuts? But the reality is that gives me the confidence now to make sure that I can support my students and my clients and my members through their journey. And that's why athletes come, because they see the value of the class. But then when you pansy it, or you make it watered down, like the hot flow that you see in a lot of the places now, people get triggered when they start getting an experience of a stronger class, because they're like, oh shit, this isn't hot yoga. And I'm like, dude, man, the original hot yoga is Bikram. That's part of the process. That was part of the cathartic experience. If you didn't like what you saw in the mirror, then change it. If not, shut up, get your work done, and leave. You have a choice. It was not about saying like, hey, you want to be in here and I've got to pacify you. No, you come in here, you like it, great. You don't like it, there's plenty of other yoga to go to. You don't have to come to us. And people used to get really upset with us. And I'm like, why get upset when we're just laying the expectation down?
Okay, but here's the point, though. So,
and you could choose.
It's all about expectation. This DW's from Germany, and they just wrote the similar article saying, Gorillas delivery riders protest unfavorable working conditions. The Berlin-based grocery delivery startup, which launched its service during the pandemic, 10-minute delivery during the pandemic. Gee, you think they got people going to use the service? People locked in their houses, 10-minute delivery. Gee, I think they might have a good product market fit. I think there's people at home that might want some 10-minute delivery when they're locked in their homes. So the Berlin-based grocery delivery startup, which launched its service during the pandemic, is expanding rapidly. Yeah, no shit. But workers say the billion-dollar company should fix local problems first. And my point is, very simply, this essentially could all be avoided if you went overboard in explaining how challenging the job is. If you give any impression, oh yeah, it's nice, it's a nice job, you're gonna love this job, it's great, you just get on a bike and you go over there and it's $10 an hour, you're fucked. You're screwed. It's not that. Don't position it that way. Position it as, we are an elite team of absolute killers. Are you qualified to join our team? I don't think you are. You look a little heavy. You look a little slow. You're breathing a little heavy. Maybe come back in 3 months from now after, but I tell you what, you want to lose 20 pounds? Hey, you can cancel your gym membership and get paid to bust your ass. Now you've set the expectation. Now you avoid headlines like this. So anyway, it's an end of rant. It's just an important message for startups.
But Tyler, you would also get the next rant. And I'm not going to go through it, but what you'd get is the flip side of that, Tyler, right? Because no one's ever happy. We're not pizza. Everyone expects everything to be really cushy, but the reality is we're not pizza, we're not ice cream. But you'd get the flip side of it, where people would then be having that sort of elite sort of recruitment process that there'd be the other set of people that would be like, oh my God, how could you treat people like that? Oh my God, how could you talk to them like that? I think that's bullying.
I'll tell you how you do it.
Because I'm in Europe and that's what happens.
They're wearing uniforms, these guerrilla folks, right? They have a colored shirt. They have a colored bag. Do the colors in military camouflage to highlight the whole aesthetic that this is boot camp.
Tyler, the brand name, who would go to gorillas not understanding what gorillas means? And you are so experienced in startup business, so you had hour-long discussions about brand names, right?
Yeah.
You could write books about it, probably, just about this issue, branding of a startup. And if I have the title Gorillas, I think, and all the visuals I find, and we have now elections in September in Germany, and I saw that the Minister for Labor was visiting even gorillas. I just saw it in the news magazine Spiegel in Germany that they're talking about the clash of cultures. Yeah, so it's just not a new thing. It's just platform economy and gig economy meeting the German here in this way, a kind of German mentality and system. Thank you.
Tyler, I just want to be fair. I just want to highlight 2 points I read briefly. Okay, so lack of proper gear, that's one.
Lack of what?
Proper gear. I guess the helmet and the equipment. And paycheck trouble. They have been owing salary. And the last one, of course, is what you say about the back-breaking job.
Yeah. Well, it's because they were not clearly. It wasn't clearly made the how difficult physically the work is, and people get fired, and then they get angry they got fired because they feel like
I guess it's also they grow very fast, which is a good thing, but they probably need a better manager to manage it well.
Yeah, they just need to kind of brand their recruitment process that it's very physically demanding and embrace that, and highlight the benefits of that. You can cancel your gym membership. You will get in the best physical shape of your life. You will lose weight. You will gain muscle doing this job. If that's not what you're in for, get the hell out of here. Avoid this place like the plague. I don't think you have what it takes. You look too heavy. You're not my employee, so I'm just telling you that person to person. I wonder how that would fly. But here's the weird thing. They are, you just said they're in Der Spiegel, right? Well, Willie?
Excuse me again?
They're in the biggest German publication, Der Spiegel, right?
Yeah, it's a kind of politicum for some weeks now.
Right.
And it's executing the old topics between the left Social Democrats and, let's say the new economy.
Yeah, here's my point.
So it's
you got off track. Yeah. I don't need that context. My point is they're in DW, one of the biggest outlets. They're in Der Spiegel. They're probably getting all kinds of press right now. Genius. Genius. How do I know that it's genius that they're getting all this press? I can guarantee you their downloads of their apps are going berserk as a result of these articles of their former employees complaining that they were treated too roughly. Because the users are like, what's this? 10-minute delivery? Holy shit, that's all I needed to know, downloading the app. I don't give a shit. Some former employee making minimum wage thought the job was too hard. All I know is there's a 10-minute delivery system called Gorillas in my neighborhood. I didn't know that. Fantastic. I'm downloading that. You know how I know this? Because Uber did the exact same thing in every city they went to. They go into a city. Yeah. What do you know? As soon as they set up shop, no one knows they're in the city. They got to let people know Uber's live in your city. Next thing you know, there's a bit of a protest going on. Drivers aren't happy. Blah, 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 blah. Press everywhere. Uber downloads explode in that city.
Yeah, good or bad news is still good marketing. 500
markets later, IPO. Who was the articles a net? It was the best. It was critical to Uber's success. These critical articles about how the disgruntled drivers. And Gorilla's playing the same playbook. So anyway, next article. The next biggest article at the moment is that tire maker Bridgestone acquires Azuga, a San Jose-based company that offers vehicle fleet tracking. There you go. Smart. Including GPS and dual-facing dash cam setup. Smart. There's a traditional dinosaur that has no data acquiring a data tech startup. Smart, because that will eventually become bigger than you. And, you know, Kodak should have bought Instagram and could have saved their ass. And Instagram's far bigger than Kodak ever was. And they could have been the first to buy it. So here you go. A tire company, although tire companies aren't going to go out of business, but they're not a data company, and now they're acquiring a San Jose fleet vehicle tracking company based on GPS data and cameras and all that. Smart. Investigation. In the last 5 years, 6 U.S. academic institutes received tens of millions of pounds in funding from Google, Facebook, Amazon, and Microsoft. This is a wild story about how the big tech companies are directly funding the research institutions that the politics engage with in determining their policies, essentially. And now some of the people at those institutions are under, as anonymous sources, are questioning, maybe we've got a little conflict of interest here. That, you know, Facebook gave us $15 million, or Google gave us $20 million over the last 5 years. That might influence the kind of reports that we generate that the politicians look at. Maybe, kinda. Yeah, that's what the article is about. It's a fantastic article. So I will tweet that out for those who want to deep dive on it. But that was a nice little summary. And the next big article is right here. It's following the UK's CMA. European Commission is launching an investigation into Facebook's acquisition of a startup called Customer with a K, with a deadline of December 22nd for a ruling. And Europe will probe Facebook's purchase of Customer, and the European Commission itself has put out a statement that says Commission opens in-depth investigation into proposed acquisition of Customer by Facebook. It'll be interesting to see how they rule, because Customer really has very little to do with Facebook's traditional businesses, so it doesn't add to their monopoly position or anything like that on the face of it. So whether or not the EU, it'll be interesting. What if the EU says you can't do it and America says you can? Then what happens? And then they're an American company and they acquired another American company. What the hell does the EU have to do with that? Next article from Politico. The FTC, Federal Trade Commission, which oversees the stock markets and whatnot, lead economics expert in an antitrust case against Facebook. Carl Shapiro has parted ways with the agency as it prepares to refile its case, which was essentially they lost their initial antitrust case again. The FTC tried to do an antitrust case against Facebook and lost. And now they have to retry the case, and they got to rewrite the rules of what a monopoly is, because those are very old laws, to apply to social networks in 2021, because they were written around kind of antiquated, industrial complex type companies. The next article from the Wall Street Journal says that New York City Council passes 5 bills aimed at reducing the power of food delivery platforms, like Gorillas we were just talking about, including extending a cap on restaurant commissions, etc. And they realize that these food delivery companies, of which there's not many, a handful. You got 3, 4, 5 in some city. New York City is the world's biggest city for food delivery, mathematically, double the second, which was Washington, D.C., and then the Bay Area and whatever. There's a chart for which in the U.S. Anyways, so within the
We're
U.S.
busy people.
Huh?
New Yorkers are busy people.
Yeah, indeed they are. And so food delivery is a very real thing there. And the New York City Council passing bills aimed at reducing the power of food delivery platforms is a huge deal because the food delivery platforms today are only food delivery platforms. They're getting the food from somewhere else. They're not kitchens themselves. They're getting the food from restaurants, right? And they might be getting it from new cloud kitchens. By the way, Travis, the co-founder and CEO of Uber, when he resigned from Uber, created cloudkitchens.com and he said this will be bigger than Uber. And he's right. Because Uber's only delivering the food, the cloud kitchen's making the food that's being delivered. So he knew, because they started Uber Eats when he was still there, and he realized Uber Eats is going to be more of Uber's deliveries are going to be food rather than people. And he's right. And Uber, so when he did cloud kitchens, genius move. And so these cloud kitchen companies are exploding everywhere. He's building warehouses everywhere, filling them with, dozens of different mini kitchens inside of them of every different Italian, Indian, Mexican, Persian, Chinese, Japanese, you name it. They're all in one warehouse with no branding, no nothing. It's just an incredibly efficient, German-like efficient warehouse of robots making all kinds of an incredibly huge menu. You in your app see it as it looks like different restaurants. They're not. It's all one big warehouse on the outside of town. And so the New York City is realizing that these food delivery platforms like Food Panda and Deliveroo and what have you and Uber Eats is they are getting the money and they are getting the order. They own the relationship with the customer and they get the money. That's the power. They have all the power. They decide where you get the food from. Eventually, they will replace the mom and pop restaurants, and eventually, due to market conditions, the dynamics of capitalism, they will make their own cloud kitchens to make all the food for everyone ordering through their apps. They'll pretend that they are restaurants just to make it more palatable to the people ordering. They'll pretend that it's a Mexican restaurant and a Polish restaurant and whatever else. But
Tyler,
yes.
part of this business model is that in some cities, like where they don't have, let's say, a huge warehouse, they are partnering with local businesses.
For the time being,
yeah, exactly. But there are issues there, right? Because if you look up your the location of where your food is coming from, and you ordered Mexican, but it came from a Chinese restaurant, that reduces trust on the consumer side too.
Right.
Yeah, can I say one thing, Tyler? But I hope the Americans don't get offended. I think it also depends on your taste buds, right? A lot of people in Asia can tell the difference between good food and not so good food, and they want to order food from the places that they like the food from. So
yeah, thanks,
I think
I was about to say the same thing.
I get what you mean.
Well, eventually what they'll do is the restaurants will start hurting. They'll go to the chefs and be like, hey, you're the chef from the highest rated Mexican restaurant. How about we double your salary to work in this cloud kitchen over here? And they need, eventually, they want to control their own supply, because just like Apple is making their own chips, and just like Google wants to make their own chips, because they don't want to be dependent on another company for something so integral to their business. And you get better margins. So if you can control the supply chain, that's the name of the game. So these delivery companies will eventually build their own cloud kitchens / cloud grocery stores, which are grocery stores optimized for robots, not human pickup people, which are they can cut the time from minutes down to seconds in building your basket of your order, and save you an additional 3 minutes on your delivery time, and lower the cost by 30%, and lower the dependency on the supermarket not being open that day, or not telling them they're not welcome there anymore, or anything like that. They're just gonna when they get to a certain size and scale, they have to remove out any dependencies they have in the supply chain. That's just an inevitable part of the evolution of that business model. So it's going to happen. And that's what I think people are starting to realize this, that Instacart is, we read the headline, they're now going to build a robotic grocery store, but they're saying they're partnering with a traditional grocery store. Well, in not so long, they're gonna they won't need to partner with a grocery store. They're just going to have their own robotic grocery store, and it's going to be grocery stores, 7-Eleven convenience stores, and restaurants all in one big factory, a cloud city. It's a cloud, robotically driven, autonomous cooks. And I don't know if, by the way, if you've seen these robotic cloud kitchens, it's fantastic how they've designed these. It's truly genius. I mean, they're kind of on the third generation of them. It's not even a robotic arm doing spaghetti like you think it would be. It's the pot shakes and everything, and almost like a paint shaker. You know, if you've ever been to Home Depot and they shake your paint when you mix paints, and it's wild. And it just plops the whole pot down into a container, and it slaps, the lid is already kind of on a hinge, and then they puts it in a bag, and someone's got to put it in the autonomous delivery vehicle that gets it to your house. The whole thing will be autonomized, in the next 5 years, soup to nuts. There'll be very little humans involved.
Tyler,
yeah.
Grab's already doing the Grab Kitchen stuff, so I'm not sure if people know about that.
Well, geez, thank you for proving my entire point.
I'm just supporting, what you've been saying. Grab Kitchens launched in 2018 or 2019.
Hello.
It's same thing that you mentioned. Yep.
Hello. Grab's the big player in Southeast Asia. Grab's doing their own kitchens. They started out not with their own kitchens. Hello? Is anyone paying attention? Is this mic on? Hello? Microphone check? Are we getting it yet? This is really
Tyler, will I have to get my own bananas?
In Singapore?
Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, Cheryl. It's been around.
Yeah. No, because why? In Singapore, in Malaysia, we have hawker and street food culture. I'm sure if you pay them good money, they will work in the so-called the cloud kitchen. Not a problem.
Okay. Next.
So meaning to say that the standard of the food still has to be there. You can't use a robot to manufacture the food, Tyler.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry.
Researchers say collection of 9 blah, blah, blah. That's that one. SPACs are being forced to fund deals. Blah. A new deleted tweet by an Intel executive says that Thunderbolt 5 could double the bandwidth of Thunderbolt 4, and then he deleted his tweet because he broke the embargo and he didn't realize it. Larry Page and Sergey Brin, the founders of Google, have sold a combined $1 billion in Google stock since May of 2021 of this year, which is the most they've sold since 2017. Google shares price have tripled since 2017. And Estonian ride-hailing startup Bolt, formerly known as Taxify, raises $713 million at a $4.75 billion valuation, led by Sequoia. Square did their quarterly earnings report, up 143% year over year, and had a nice uptick as a result. And Zoom agrees to pay $85 million to bolster security and settle a class action lawsuit. Okay, so now we get into the more interesting headlines from Forbes. Panic is suddenly spreading among Bitcoin, Ethereum, and the Doge communities as crypto traders are feeling nervous due to the $550 billion bipartisan infrastructure bill that currently is making its way through the U.S. legislature. And if you were with us from the beginning, you know why. And they very much should be shitting themselves over this infrastructure bill, because there's provisions inside of this bill that fundamentally change the entire game of crypto in America. Bitcoin and cryptocurrency prices have soared this weekend, with the Bitcoin price making significant gains over $40,000. The Bitcoin price climbed to almost $43,000 per Bitcoin last night, its highest since mid-May, and almost $10,000 higher than its price this time last week. Meanwhile, the Ethereum price has also led the cryptocurrency market higher over the last 24 hours. However, many crypto traders are feeling increasingly nervous due to the $550 billion bipartisan bill that's currently making its way through the legislature and includes a provision to raise $28 billion from crypto investors, with some warning it could kill the industry. And indeed, it very likely could, if you know exactly what I'm talking about if you were here for the long rant an hour ago, because the bill essentially is going to require any crypto startup to record all of the personal details and addresses, registered addresses of every user of their crypto startup.
Can Can I interject here? Because like, if your startup is decentralized in nature, say if you're running a decentralized autonomous organization,
a DAO,
you literally
have no
can
office.
say fuck you
that you could.
to the IRS.
I specifically said this case. This is what's going to happen. Is it's going to accelerate.
They're kind of moot.
Yeah. Well, no. What it's going to do,
the IRS
it's not moot at all. What it does is, well, in the case of a DAO, it is, yes. So it's going to create and exacerbate the creations of DAOs versus you're going to have two choices. There's no middle ground anymore. You're either going to have to fully comply, which is now the antithesis of Satoshi Nakamoto's white paper and the whole intent of Bitcoin of being truly decentralized. And now you've got to get everybody's addresses and verified identities of every user on your cryptocurrency platform. Some will do that. Coinbase has no choice. They're going to have to do that because they're a publicly traded company now.
Yeah, and I deleted my Coinbase, and it takes 5 years for that. It takes you 5 years for your information to be wiped, and they do have inner workings with the IRS. I read into that.
Yeah, but now they're going to have more data on every user than they even currently do, due to this bill that's going to get passed. Now, the opposite is going to happen is you're going to have a whole bunch of crypto folks who are going to wish they had started out totally anonymously in a DAO type framework, because if you registered yourself as a Delaware LLC or created any kind of legal American company structure, even as a individual doing a LLC or a partnership of some kind or a C Corp or an S Corp or whatever, you're done. You got to start over because you don't really have a choice. You need to start over as a DAO, a DAO, decentralized organization, and be fully pseudonymous like Satoshi was, and build your structure in a way that the government can't touch and can't shut down. And that's going to...
Tyler, if you company that's taking
say what?
VC or equity, if you're a startup that's got funding,
right, you're done.
Screwed.
You're screwed. You now either have to fully comply with the IRS, which is now going to require identity verifications with addresses of every user on your platform, or start over and go fully Satoshi mode.
Or you could just sell NFTs that represent a utility within your platform and then just go that route and stop. You don't need to register anything so the assholes can track you. You're everyone's fine. You can, keep playing in the sandbox.
Can I comment on this? I
perhaps not. The wording in the provision in the new bill refers to people as brokers. And you could be a broker of a utility, but if it has value, that's where they will try to get you from the IRS perspective. But you're right. You're going to have to make the argument that
the keyword is try.
Right.
The keyword is try.
Well, no, but they're the jury. They're the judge in the decision as to whether or not you're guilty. So it's you who are going to have to try to convince them. They have the power of the fucking army to come to your fucking house and shut you down. It's their choice.
Do it.
You have no choice in the matter. It's it's at their discretion. They're the judge, executioner, and the jury in this trial.
I'd like to see them try. I know.
Tyler, I think Linus wants to speak.
So your question of them trying is meaningless. They don't need to try. They just do.
Yeah.
I know, and that's Tyler, if they can find me.
Tyler, I think I love Russ and Tyler.
Russ, I recommend you have lunch with a couple of my friends, Edward Snowden, and
yeah, go join him in Russia.
Yeah, they got my friend too.
Yeah,
Tyler. But then this goes back. Sorry, the dog's barking. This goes back to what you were saying in terms of. This goes back to what you were saying about finding. It's those locations that will make it attractive for these individuals to bring their business there, right? If we start to navigate sort of this new organizational infrastructure like a DAO, right? Wyoming's the one state that has...
30 seconds on this is boring ass shit. We got to move on.
Okay, got it. Basically, they're going to find you anyway because as long as you have the United States passport, that's why people are giving up their passport.
This is my point. It's going to exacerbate...
I have a bunch of people that are giving out their passports.
You're going to have a crypto exodus. Some percentage of the American-based crypto community are going to have to move. Simple as that.
I think you taking this a bit too dramatic, Tyler, because look at the ICO, for example, bubble that was a few years ago.
Yes.
All of them simply just excluded anyone from America.
Correct.
Because it could be considered as
And
security,
Linus, they still
and
do.
that would cause, of course.
Linus, you're Swedish, right?
No one. Yeah, I
am. So this is the Swedish perspective, which is like, oh, who cares? We just don't have anything to do with America. And you could do that. You could say we refuse any Americans on the platform, as the ICOs did, to comply with America's rules. You can do that. That is one approach.
I see it as three ways.
What I'm referring to, but Linus, forgive me. I'm referring to American crypto community. And the founders
and there are either business that already do this KYC, full KYC.
Mm-hmm.
Most companies that is involved in any custodial of customers' money, they already do this. So I don't see the difference there. There are also those who actually don't provide a service related to transactions, but they are a startup within blockchain.
True.
And they are not affected by this because they don't do transactions as a service.
Correct.
And you have, like you mentioned, the ones that already go for the anonymous or fully decentralized way. And so I don't see this as a showstopper at all.
Yeah. Let me ask you this,
Linus.
It's
just a hinder.
True. It's relevant to a non-trivial percentage of crypto American startups, though. So, Linus, if you were a American living in America doing a decentralized DAO system, would you feel comfortable staying in America with this?
I would not do that in America, and I'm actually.
That's not my. But please, it's a yes or no question.
I'm moving from Sweden for the same reason. I've been fighting the government for 6 years already, so I'm moving to Malta in just a few months. So.
Yeah, as many Swedes do, as many of my friends have, who are doing, the game, what we call gaming startups, which are kind of gambling, online gambling and whatnot. Yeah, Malta made itself. Similar, Moldova has a fantastic opportunity. Malta might as well, or Gibraltar. Traditionally there are geographies that see an opportunity, and as Malta has. And there's been some fantastic Swedish unicorns that were built out of Malta, So there you go. Great point, Linus. So the next biggest headline at the moment, or the most interesting one, let's put it that way. So let me retweet out this one from Forbes about panic is setting in amongst crypto traders. And the next one is Tencent. And here, Ken, this is yours. The Tencent article, Wall Street Journal. You were waiting for this one. Tencent plummets as China takes aim at online video games. And Tencent is the biggest player in video games globally. And
acquired another huge they just spent like some billions on a UK gaming company.
Yeah, that's every week. They're buying up gaming studios around the world, and they're becoming the mega. They're like the LVMH of games. What LVMH is to luxury fashion.
They spent like 1.3 billion on this deal a month ago.
No problem. Pocket change. They're buying up major gaming studios all around the world. They want to consolidate the gaming market. By the way, there's a player out of Stockholm doing an individual, a big private equity figure in Stockholm doing the same. Linus, you might even recall the name of the guy who's rolling up all of it's called a roll-up in business, economics class, where you find an industry that's doing really well, you start acquiring all of the players, and somebody could come and acquire all of the food delivery companies and make it one mega global food delivery company. Somebody might eventually do that if the politicians would let them. Same concept. Someone's going and buying up all the gaming studios. You just get market efficiencies because you don't need a separate marketing team for every single game. You only need one big mega marketing team of the best 10% of the marketers across all of those different titles. And you just get efficiencies by consolidating internally what's called a roll-up. So Tencent is kind of rolling up video game studios. So is this guy out of Stockholm. And you're seeing what's just called consolidation in the market. And you're seeing mass consolidation in the video game space. Great for video game founders. It's much more easy to get acquired. Anyway, so the article said shares of Tencent and rivals plummeting Tuesday after a state-owned Chinese newspaper criticized online gaming as opium for the mind, fueling investor concerns that companies' popular games could be swept into a broader regulatory crackdown. So, to unpack this, China's cracking down on different industries, namely EdTech just got cracked down on. Now, the housing market is getting cracked down on as we speak, and some Chinese newspaper made a little comment in their newspaper saying that online gaming is opium for the mind, and that has led to a sell-off of Chinese video games because they're worried, because in China the newspapers are controlled by the state. And so when the newspaper says video games are opium for the mind, it's a way for the government to send a little hint, smokescreen message test to see how people respond to the idea that we might crack down on video games, which, by the way, they already are. You have to, you can't play video games under the age of 18 past 10 p.m. How do they control that? Through facial recognition algorithms, where you're looking at your screen, the camera looks at your face. If you're under 18, it's past 10 a.m., your game stops. That because it's the opium of the mind. They don't want you playing video games. It's not good for you as an individual. You're eating too much junk food. You're mentally diabetic. You're emotionally obese. Stop doing things that are bad for you. We're going to control that for you. You don't have self-control. We do. You're done. The state's deciding, what's best for you. So if the Chinese newspaper says online gaming is opium for the mind, oh shit. That is a sign they potentially might crack down on the video game industry, which the valuations will get cut in half. So investors panic and are selling off. That's what's happening.
Hey,
they might be right. And by the way, let's go in and bring in, David Chang and our other friends in Beijing and find out, is there any talk within the government that they think one of the reasons leading to the declining birth rate is video games? Because we've discussed this in America, that this is not when on the topic of the global declining birth rates of all of the developing countries, which they all are, one of the theories is that it's in some way related to video games. And the CCP might be thinking the same. I can't blame them if they are. I've thought the same about the declining birth rates across Europe and America. So they might actually want to crack down on video games as they perceive them to be opiates of the mind. And more importantly, castration of the male population, digital castration, or some, what's a prophylactic of, maybe it's relating to the declining birth rate. And if they decide that video games are declining the birth rate, yeah, they will crack down on it because that's their overarching meta-narrative objective at the moment. You were saying, Vinay?
Yeah, so a couple of hours right after that article came out, I've tweeted to you, China's Tencent Holdings said on Tuesday it would curb minors' access to its flagship video game hours after its shares were battered by a state media article that described online. So Tencent's already scrambling, putting in stuff, right? So they've lost enough money with all of the other
what's coming next.
They're doing.
Here's what's coming next. Official Chinese state dating app coming your way. That's an easy prediction. By the way, Iran just did the same. That was a headline last week in Iran. That state
with
sponsored
genetic
dating
matching, with genetic matching, right?
They very well might, but they're going to continue to do endlessly until the birth rate improves. They're going to crack down on everything they see as an impedance to the birth rate.
Yeah, and the article says the government has vowed to strengthen rules around online gaming and education to protect child well-being. So they're very, very clear on
that. 1 second here. I just want to find something in this article.
That's terrifying, right? Is anyone else terrified by that, or is it just me?
Americans would be terrified by it. People living in the rest of the world wouldn't be.
Yeah,
okay,
Russ,
cool.
But
Tyler, I'm not alone.
I'll add something when you're done.
Go ahead,
Russ, if you have a chance to travel the world, you will know that there are many nice and beautiful places outside of America. So give that a chance first before you decide what you want to do.
Go ahead.
I think I was going to add, I think on the birth rate side is people forget that America, Europe, China included, and Europe, America, China, Slate, and most of the industrialized world has an aging population that's approaching 65, I think, with 15,000 people daily. So only in the Middle East, and China's worried about this, they've been worried about this for years, are they worried about the next 30 years? Like, where will their population be? And I think you're right. If you see these official dating apps in Iran or these other countries, they're trying to change the dynamic because most of our population is, greater than 50. The ones that control the most wealth and that have the influence and power globally are greater than 50, if not 60. And you're going to see a different swing on that. That's what I would add. So I think you'll see more of this coming.
So check this out. In this article, it highlights more of kind of what I was suggesting, which it says, one motivation for Beijing to address social concerns, such as relieving the extreme pressures placed on children by the country's highly competitive education systems. Chinese authorities have previously raised concerns about the gaming habits of young people. In 2018, for a period, they stopped issuing video game licenses. Since then, Tencent, the biggest gaming company in China, has worked closely with the authorities that approve games in China. So to make a game in China, it must be approved by the authorities. A role now filled by the National Press and Publication Administration. Earlier this month, Tencent launched a facial recognition system to limit late-night gaming by children, as I just said. Tencent is an industry powerhouse, and Honor of Kings was the world's top grossing game in both 2019 and 2020. And Tencent's gaming revenue, last week, a senior Communist Party official told an industry expo in Shanghai that preventing young people from becoming addicted to video games was a top priority for the CCP. We will keep a close eye on it, said Yang Feng, the deputy director of Publication Bureau of the party's Central Propaganda Department. They're keeping a very close eye on video game addiction. Why would they care? Productivity, and birth rate.
But there's also this one piece of the end goal that they can't legislate away. The gender imbalances that came out of the long-term one-child policy.
Yeah,
I mean, you need more women to be making those babies. So it's going to be interesting to see how they're going to tackle that.
Yeah. Good point. The next one is from Forbes. Self-driving tech developer Aurora raises $2 billion for self-driving cars. Not a surprise if you follow tech news around the world every day. And you know why the investors are throwing billions of dollars into autonomous vehicles. You know why? Because you want all of that shit at your house. E-commerce is going to take over. Scientists reverse age-related memory loss in mice. Not just any scientist. That's David Sinclair, my buddy who spoke at my event 2 years ago from Harvard University, who's now considered the world's leading expert on not only aging, but reversing aging in his lab, as he claims he's done with mice at Harvard. And they think they've starting to figure it out. Good times. Now this article is about reversing age-related memory loss in mice. Fantastic. Let's hope they have. And they mentioned how the mouse brain similar in this regard to the human brain, and the next step is to do kind of human trials on this. SpaceX engineers in race to build. Now they've changed their headline. Funny. In race to build first commercial electric speedboat. And I pinged my friend Conrad Bergstrom, which Linus on stage might know Conrad. Pretty much every Swede is familiar with Conrad. He built all of those Marshall Bluetooth speakers that people have in their offices and houses if they want to feel like a rock star, and they've got these, Marshall Bluetooth speakers and headphones, which are incredibly popular around Europe. And that's my buddy Conrad, who then, when he left that company, started a new electric boat, like a Tesla for boats, called X-Shore, which he launched at my event about 2.5 years ago on stage live. And now there's a new headline of a new Tesla for boats called Arc Boat. I just was chatting with Conrad in Facebook Messenger, and he says he will likely join us tomorrow, or his CEO, which I'm trying to remember the name of. Anyway, but this is an SpaceX engineers are joining the Tesla for Boats race. They just raised $4.2 million in seed funding for a 475 horsepower craft. And 6 videos by Sky News Australia host Alan Jones, Ronan Dean, and Rita Panahi have been removed for YouTube for COVID misinformation. And that's a Rupert Murdoch outlet being censored by YouTube. So now Rupert hates Facebook, and now Rupert hates YouTube. So watch what happens as he will retaliate in very clever ways, in which we will see those headlines when he does.
MySpace is coming back.
which Rupert bought, by the way. Yeah, it's funny. Telstra, the incumbent telecom operator in Australia, have made national calls free from 15,000 payphones that still exist miraculously in Australia. I don't know which is the bigger headline, that there's actually still payphones in Australia, or that they're making them free.
What's a payphone, Tyler?
Yeah, it's a long story. How to explain this? People used to put coins into phones bolted to the ground in public areas.
Is that a comical question or an actual question?
Rhonda, you should have seen it before.
What's a coin?
How do you put Bitcoin in a phone?
Oh no.
Yeah, Lilium in talks with Brazilian airline for a $1 billion order. I love this one. Oh my God, what a sexy photo this is. I just tweeted out from Poppy. You got to see this. It shows the new Lilium 7-seater jet flying into Rio de Janeiro, Ipanema Beach, it appears. Fantastic photo. Holy shit. Oh my God, I want that thing. That is number one on my Christmas list. The Lilium fully electric vertical takeoff and landing jet. No propellers, jets. Fantastic. Oh my God. NovaKid investors bet $35 million that it can teach kids English. We covered that, and now I'm tweeting it again. Thank you for that one. And U.S. Senate bill seeks to require anti-drunk driving vehicle tech. Alcohol detection systems in vehicles that prevent impaired driving could save upward of 9,000 lives annually in the U.S. How are they going to do it? They have to put a little hose that you blow into to start your car, I imagine. How else would they do anti-drunk driving vehicle tech? You could do a math puzzle or some shit like that.
Tyler.
Or they can check with the retina, like there can be an eye scanner in the car.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, you can do alcohol through retina. That's right. There you go, Mahogany. Go ahead, LS.
Well, that's weird. I don't want to speak too much about OC, but I was talking to a girl about a few months ago because of COVID that said she used to do toxicity, blood tests for alcohol. But she said that she got basically laid off. There wasn't enough work.
Yep.
So if they're going to tech, I think they can't set up enough roadblocks to know what people are doing, especially because marijuana, I don't do it, but marijuana is legal in California. So they're looking for anything, DUI. It's not just alcohol. It might be any substance. And so that's intriguing to me with opiates, marijuana, and everything else in the U.S., that they can do it through the car versus individuals, because they used to make a lot of money off of that. And she said, yeah.
So the next interesting tweet just came from Dan, and I think he had to get himself to sleep. But this gives us a fantastic opportunity to play our favorite new show, Tech News Jeopardy. Which country has the highest market share of new vehicles sold as EVs? Is it Japan, Korea, China, Sweden, California, Netherlands, or Norway?
Norway.
You said country or state? Because California's a state.
Oh, you're right. California is one of them.
We're like a country. Come on.
Are you saying per capita or total number?
Yeah, market share of vehicle sales percentage. The answer, by an overwhelming landslide, no one's even close, is Norway. Netherlands is second, just above Sweden. Norway is about approaching 60% of all car sales in Norway are EVs.
Oh, we got it right.
There are a lot of incentives.
Yes, incredible incentives there. And Netherlands is under 20%. Sweden's around 15%. China's around 8%. And Korea and Japan and everything else around 5%. So you can see the chart. I just tweeted it from the Tech News Twitter account, and you can see just how overwhelmingly Norway is largely due to incentives, as Mahogany said. They have amazing incentives there. Yes.
Netherlands really likes their e-vehicles quite a lot because they have a huge sharing economy. and the sharing cars are electric.
Yeah, their taxis are all EVs as well.
Oh, they love it. The taxis are Teslas here. Everyone loves it when they arrive in Amsterdam because probably half the taxis, if not more, are Teslas.
And a lot of 100% are Teslas in Norway.
I know. I know that when I came in one time, coming back from the US, I noticed that all of the taxis were Teslas. And I think now they're sort of becoming more e-vehicles, like not just Teslas, but e-vehicle. And the car shares are also e. And the bikes now, the scooter shares are also electric now.
Yeah.
So they're really kind of revamping everything to become more sustainable in that context.
Okay, here we go. Real speed style now. We have to save that one for next time and save that one for next time. Lindsey Graham has COVID-19. You know, the Republican senator who 3 days previously joined a protest about not having to wear masks and whatnot. Yeah, that guy just got COVID himself. There you go, Lindsey. Well done. You did it. And in news that everyone predicted, jihadists flood pro-Trump social network. We covered that. Amazon will pay you $10 for your palm print biometrics. Amazon can use the data it collects, like shopping history, to target ads, offers and recommendations to you over time. This article from TechCrunch: Amazon will pay you $10 for your palm print biometrics. The retail giant has a spotty history with biometric data, but they're doing self-checkout now at their supermarkets with palm reading. And that's why they want to register your palm, so that when you go into an Amazon supermarket, which has no staff, you put everything in your basket, you walk out by simply putting your palm on the scanner and you walk out. And that's why they need your palm. There you go. Amazon also, in this headline, Amazon's AI cameras reportedly determine drivers' pay and employment status. A recent report found that Amazon's cameras track and score drivers based on how they conform to safety rating system. For example, they reportedly determine drivers' pay and employment status by scoring safety infractions like tailgating and running red lights. Amazon's AI camera systems track when delivery drivers run stop signs or perform illegal U-turns. Documents found that the cameras can determine a driver's pay or employment status. Amazon has faced backlash in the past for its use of AI systems to track employees. The publication obtained confidential documents that revealed Amazon has developed a point system for drivers using cameras in its delivery trucks that can identify anything from sneeze to whether a driver has their eyes on the road or is following another car too closely. How dare they? The 4 cameras, including one camera that points directly at the driver from underneath the rear view mirror, are made by Netrodyne and focus on both the inside and outside of the delivery van. Amazon has said in the past that the cameras are not continuously live, but only come into play when the built-in AI detects potentially unsafe circumstances like unexpected braking or distracted driving. An Amazon spokesperson said that the camera system has improved safety for drivers. This technology provides drivers real-time alerts to help them stay safe when they are on the road. Yep. Again, you just got to be upfront with this stuff and tell your drivers, hey, do you want to have cameras all over you all the time? You don't? Good. Get out of here. End of interview. Stop. And just it's either that or journalists just are bored and need shit to write about. Is there any quote from a driver claiming kind of anything? No, there's not. It's just, okay. There we go. Let's tweet that one out. There it goes. It's gone. All right. Next article. The breaking news: beware, brave boys and girls. If you think Delta is to be dangerous, Lambda may be a potential threat to human society, as Delta infections among vaccinated likely contagious. Lambda variant shows what is it about Lambda? This is from Reuters.
Resistance to
shows vaccine resistance in labs. Yeah. Oh, lovely.
And it's very scary.
Yeah, the following round, here we go. Among people infected by Delta variant of the coronavirus, fully vaccinated people with breakthrough infections may be just as likely as unvaccinated people to spread the virus to others. The higher the amount of coronavirus in the nose and throat, the more likely the patient will infect others. After Delta became dominant in Wisconsin, researchers analyzed viral loads on the nose and throat, and swabs obtained with patients were first diagnosed. They found similar viral loads in vaccinated and unvaccinated patients, with levels often high enough to allow shedding virus. Let's get to the headlines about Lambda, though. Where's Lambda? Give me the news on Lambda.
Tyler, if you check out my pinned tweet, it does have the details on Lambda.
Here we go. The Lambda variant of the virus, first identified in Peru, is now spreading in South America. It's highly infectious and more resistant to vaccines than the original version of the virus. The in-lab tests, they found that 3 mutations of Lambda spike protein help it resist neutralization by vaccine-induced antibodies. 2 additional mutations help make Lambda highly infectious, they found. In a paper ahead of peer review, the research warns that Lambda being labeled a variant of interest by the World Health Organization rather than variant of concern. People might not realize it is a serious ongoing threat, although it is not clear yet whether this variant is more dangerous than Delta, now threatening populations in many countries. Lambda can be a potential threat to human society, if it's as contagious as Delta, but defeating of vaccines. Because then we're really screwed. Because then we need to come up with a new vaccine that works against Lambda if we can. And we might not, like the common cold or like traditional flus. You can make a vaccine that's like helps diminish a bit, like the common cold, but it's getting to a point where you get too many variations, like the flu, where your annual flu shot, it doesn't mean you won't get it. It just means, it'll be less intense. And maybe that starts being the new normal, is vaccines that can just minimize the effects. Okay. So there we go. Lambda could be some serious stuff. Next one is Apple App Store, iTunes now accept payments via UPI, RuPay as additional payment options on App Store and iTunes. iOS users can also add funds to their Apple ID. This is good news for people in India who use RuPay, basically. So there you go. For Indians, wildfires blaze on in drought-hit Turkey as criticism grows. Firefighters using planes and helicopters and locals with buckets of water battled wildfires raging for a 6th day near southern coastal resorts in Turkey. And what's the criticism? 7 fires were still burning. The government faced fresh criticism of its handling of the disaster. We are here as the entire village, from the locals to the others. We didn't run or anything, so the government must see this and also not run away. It must send some planes here, a woman called. Yeah, that's not how fires work. Telling you as someone from California, you get the fuck out of there. You don't wait on the government to do nothing. As somebody who lives in the fire zone of Southern California, where we have annual fire season, get the fuck out of there and stop asking the government to come send a plane. Don't risk your damn life for your house, as everybody in Malibu knows very, very well. Doesn't matter if you're a billionaire. Your house burns to the ground just like anybody else's. Amazon union election should be rerun, labor official says. Yeah, well, I think Amazon says the opposite. A federal official has recognized overturning the results of a union election at Amazon warehouse in Alabama that we started covering live in real time every day about 2.5 months ago, which the Amazon won against the union 66 to 33, as I recall. And now a federal official has recommended overturning the results. And Amazon isn't going to let that go down easily, because Amazon unionizing is an existential threat to the entire $1 trillion company. They're not going to throw a $1 trillion company into the ocean easily. They're not going to let that one go down easily. They're one of the biggest companies on the planet, worth over $1 trillion. That is a unionization of Amazon is an absolute gun, a loaded gun to the head of Amazon. And they're not going to let you do that. They're not going to let you unionize. If you unionize a location, they will shut it down instantly. You're going to have to unionize all warehouses simultaneously. If you try and unionize one, they will very happily shut that down They'll happily cut off their pinky finger to save the entire body. Your move, unions. West Africa bloc plans to start cross-border debt market in 2023. So basically, West African bloc of 15 West African nations to link up their debt markets is on track to become a reality by the end of 2023. Part of a wider push to unify Western Africa. Very real fourth wave is the quote, presses the FDA to fully approve COVID shots. Agency also looking at international data as it weighs booster doses, says the vaccine chief. Yep, you do need the boosters. It's pretty freaking simple. How to build a water smart city is the headline from Bloomberg. As water shortages and drought becomes increasingly common, cities will need to invest in infrastructure and find ways to recycle their supply. Fair enough. Deutsche Bank pivots to virtual tech conference as Delta spreads, as I am as well. It looks like my annual September event ain't going to happen. And doesn't look like I can reschedule it for any time in the fall. So we'll have to do it here in Clubhouse. Oh, darn. And then China Spectre jolts ByteDance backers to try trimming stakes, as from Bloomberg, a handful of investors rattled by China's sweeping regulatory changes are looking to offload private stakes in TikTok. Yep, everyone wants to sell all their Chinese tech companies, worried that they might be the next Crackdown, where they'll have that all of their investment disappear overnight. That's what happens when you kill an industry. U.S. Air Force developed a bird-like micro drones with flapping wings the size of a common housefly or a mosquito. And make note of who created that. It's the U.S. Air Force. So do you think they'll be militarized? Nah. It's just the military making mosquito-sized drones. Will the military militarize these? No, of course not. They're commercial, right? It's for your kids on Christmas. That's why the U.S. Air Force is making these. Dubai will bring Michelin star chefs over 200 exclusive dining options to Expo 2020. The lineup will include everything from globally famous Michelin-starred chefs to local stalwarts as they get ready to prepare for Expo 2020, and it's quite a massive thing they got going on there in Dubai. I'm tempted to get over there myself. Precog AI will forecast what's going to happen in the next few days. The Pentagon believes its precognitive AI can predict events in the future. And the big question, does this warrant a preemptive strike or pre-crime arrests? From Jeremiah. We will dive deep into that when we meet again in about 5 hours, just less than 5 hours. So we will pause.
Like Minority Report.
Yeah, exactly. Minority Report. There we go. So a big thank you to everybody for yet another news-filled, rant-filled tech news around the world. We will meet again in just